This is the public hearing for application 1-2 of 21. The application of Dwight City Group for the use variance under Article 3, Section 550 from single family detached dwellings to multi-family dwelling apartments. The total number of apartments shall not exceed 240. Site requires full utility tie-ins and private road and would be cost prohibitive to develop as single family homes. This property is situated at 800 East Providence Road in Clifton Heights, PA. It is in the RC Residential Conservation District, zoning district, and it is in the Second Council District.
Great. Madam Chair, with your permission, I'll find Mr. Mancini and go over some housekeeping.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Mancini, are you there? Let's see. Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Mancini?
Am I unmuted?
Now you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mancini. I believe you represent the applicant tonight, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Musa.
All right. So a couple housekeeping things first. I know your client submitted an application originally back in January, and then I believe in February submitted an amended application. Is that correct?
I believe so, and I think there's a further amendment based on the publication. The number of units have been reduced from 240 to 204.
Okay.
And the building's reduced from 20 to 14.
So from 20 buildings to 14 buildings, and from 240 units to what?
204.
Okay. And you said that was a second amended application, or?
Well, I think that was amended by way of the exhibits that were finally prepared, engineered sketch plans and things of that nature.
Okay.
So we're going down, not up. So it should not be a
Sure.
problem.
All right. Well, we'll mark as zoning hearing board exhibit 1 your original application, and zoning hearing board exhibit 2 the amended application, and zoning hearing board exhibit 3 the advertisement in the newspaper. And then I believe you've taken care of the rest of the exhibits, and we'll go over those later. All right. So how many witnesses do you have tonight, and how many witnesses do you have total?
As we discussed previously, I have 3 witnesses tonight. There was Mr. Angster, Mr. Dennis O'Neill, the engineer, which I think will take quite a bit of time, and also Mr. John Carullo, the traffic engineer. And I had requested a second hearing because I fully anticipate that tonight's going to be taken up with these witnesses, both on direct and cross, and also with the difficulty I had with one engineer one.
Sure. And I mean, sorry. So you have 4 witnesses total. Your plan is to put on 3 witnesses tonight. And
Correct.
Then I think when we get to the end of tonight, we'll figure out with you and the board and whoever is admitted as parties on another, I think, special hearing date for this application.
Thank you.
And just to be clear for members of the public, I know there's a lot of interest in this application. That's why we're scheduling these special hearings. Tonight, we might not get to public comment at large. The way these work is the applicant gets a chance to put on his case. So he'll get to put on his witnesses when what we call direct examination, submit whatever documentary evidence that they would like, subject to any objections, and a final admittance by the zoning hearing board. Anybody, we have several attorneys here tonight that are seeking party status. Any parties will be able to cross-examine the witnesses. But then public, and then of course, anybody who's in opposition will be able to put on a case of their own if they wish at a later, more subsequent hearing date. And then finally, once both sides have put on their cases, that's when we will have public comment. And so it's likely that we won't get to general public comment tonight. And I just want everyone to understand that, of course, everybody's welcome to be here and to watch. And I want to make clear as well, we do accept written public comment, not questions, but if you have just something you want to say, you can always email Pam Marino at the township and we'll accept those and put those into the record as well. All right. So, Mr. Mancini, unless you can think of something else, I want to start figuring out who are the parties here.
Absolutely. So do I.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Up first, we have John Mcblane. Hi, Mr. Mcblane.
Good evening.
Good evening. And so obviously you're a well-known attorney in the county, and I believe you sent us a letter saying you're representing the Roselawn Civic Association and 3 individuals, Thomas Tauber, Donald Doyle, and Donald Procopio. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. So I guess talk about Roselawn Civic Association. Why should they be a party to this matter?
Well, the Roselawn Civic Association is a not-for-profit corporation that was formed some decades ago and has been active in that area for neighborhood issues regarding Roselawn, both traditional neighborhood issues and also land use issues. They've been involved previously, specifically regarding the development of this property and other developments in the area.
So are they close to this land?
They are the Thompson Tract abuts what traditionally is known as the Roselawn neighborhood. On the other side, I'll say the eastern side of the Thompson Tract, I guess I'll call it, is the Roselawn area. The western side is what's known typically as the Penn Manor area. The Roselawn area being generally characterized as single-family homes of different architectural styles and dates on generally larger lots as compared to probably the average lot in Upper Darby. The Penn Manor properties, which are the sort of the state streets, Maine, Montana, California, Maryland Avenue, are more post-Second World War colonial development. And then finally, across Providence Road is what's generally known as the Penn Pines neighborhood, which again are post-World War II development, generally speaking, Cape Cod properties. Mr. Tauber and Mr. Doyle are both on the Roselawn side of the Thompson Tract. Mr. Procopio is on the Penn Manor side.
All right. So let's talk about Mr. Procopio. So he lives in the Penn Manor side. How close is his property to the Thompson Tract?
He is within 1 block. He is on Montana Avenue, which is one of the streets that are immediately adjacent, coming off of Providence Road, would be parallel to the Thompson Tract.
Okay. And then Mr. Tauber and Mr. Doyle live in the Roselawn Civic Association. How close are their individual properties to the Thompson Tract?
Mr. Tauber is on Elm Tree Road, which is runs directly into the Thompson Tract, and Mr. Mr. Doyle is, I believe, either Roselawn or Hilldale. I apologize, I forget the name.
Sure, that's fine. But you know how many feet they are from the property from Thompson Tract?
Within hundreds of feet.
Somebody say something? Okay.
No,
Just so I'm clear, what Mr. Mcblane, in your mind, what's the purpose of Mr. Tauber and Mr. Doyle being individual parties if Roselawn Civic Association is accepted as a party?
Well, they're members of the Civic Association. I mean, a little bit, Mr. Amuso is, both suspenders and belts. Now that Mr. Mancini's here, I'm sure he's going to have some objection, to their participation because they looked the wrong way or something. But Mr. Tauber and Mr. Doyle are both the co-president of the Roselawn Civic Association.
Okay.
And are meant in general to represent, be individual objectors that live in the Roselawn section, which is probably most closely connected to the Thompson tract. Mr. Procopio is a representative neighbor from the Penn Manor neighborhood on the other side of the Thompson tract.
Mhm. Okay. Mr. Mancini, what questions do you have of Mr. Mcblane about the party status of his clients?
John, do any of these residents abut this property?
I know Mr. Tauber does.
I thought you had said that he's on Elm Tree Road.
Elm Tree runs directly into the lower part of the Thompson tract.
But I mean, does his rear boundary abut the boundary line, the eastern boundary line of the subject parcel, or is it just fronting on Elm Tree Road?
Well, he fronts on Elm Tree Road, but if you take a look, Elm Tree Road is a private street, I believe, that where there's perhaps 4 houses that are all, basically adjacent to the Thompson tract.
When you say adjacent to, does it abut the parcel?
Yeah, I would have to ask Mr. Tauber that.
Because I would suggest to you that they don't abut. And the other aspect is Mr. Doyle, he clearly doesn't abut because you had said that they were both within a couple 100 feet of the tract. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Procopio's on the other side where you have Main Avenue, and then there's, what was the street that you indicated?
Montana Avenue.
So that's what, another block away from there?
Correct.
I am going to object to standing on this particular instance because, number one, we're not entering any of the streets that these folks are on. We were very sensitive about that. That's why we're building a singular cul-de-sac from East Providence Road. Number two, the parcels, these property owners are well away from this parcel and will not be affected in any direct manner by the development of this parcel. I'm not quite sure what the basis of potential harm to these folks is.
So, Mr. Mcblane, can you tell us what the substantial, direct, and immediate impact would be on your clients of this development?
Certainly. The first would be from an environmental perspective, they would be impacted from the diminution of open space and the dense residential development that is proposed by the applicant. They live within the watershed of the Darby Creek and would be affected by the stormwater runoff. I think you will hear from these witnesses when they testify regarding potential flooding in the area, water in basements. So once again, any dense development that will occur, will affect them from a stormwater runoff standpoint. From a traffic standpoint, you will hear about the fact that Arbor Lee and Roselawn and Hilldale roads are already used as cut-through areas to avoid the intersections of Lansdowne Avenue and Providence Road. And the state streets, such as Montana, where Mr. Procopio is used as a cut-through to avoid the intersection at Providence and Springfield Road. The development that the sketch plan that I've seen, and I would suggest to the board that there's been little, if any, availability of the proposed plans here. The only plan that I've seen has traffic egressing onto Main Avenue, which necessarily is going to send traffic through that Penn Manor neighborhood for these 240 units. So should I keep going?
No, so these would be the effects that they would have on your clients beyond just the general interest of the public in
Correct.
development.
And I'm unaware of any case law or any court that's ever decided that a neighbor, in order to be a party, must be abutting or touching the property.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Madam Chair, I think the watershed issue alone, I think would provide enough impact for Mr. McBlane's clients to grant them party status if the board so chooses.
I would agree with that. So I'm
All right.
okay with that.
All right. So Mr. McBlane, we'll grant party status to Roselawn Civic Association, to Mr. Tauber, to Mr. Doyle, and to Mr. Procopio.
Thank you.
So may
And I understand you object, Mr.
Thank you.
Mancini.
Okay,
You
just as long as
object, your
my objection
No,
carries forward. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. We're doing this over your objection.
Thank you.
Mr. Siegel, Mr. Siegel here.
Yes, good evening.
Hi. All right. Mr. Siegel, you're here, I understand, to represent Alden Borough. Is that correct?
Yes,
All right. I've talked to the zoning hearing board about this, and just so everyone's aware, I actually happen to be the solicitor for Alden Borough. I'm also obviously the solicitor for the Upper Darby Zoning Hearing Board. And so I am not representing the borough in this matter. I have not participated at all with any conversations that the borough council or the mayor or the manager have had. In fact, I recommended they needed to hire special counsel. And again, we got the who's who of the Delaware County Bar here. They hired Mr. Siegel. So just want everyone aware that I'm not involved with Alden Borough on this. So Mr. Siegel, what do you think entitles Alden Borough to party status for this matter?
Alden Borough is the adjoining municipality to the area where the development is. Will have a significant, the development, as Mr. McBlane said, where the limited information we know would demonstrate that this development would have a significant impact on the borough, and under the municipal planning code as an adjacent municipality, they're entitled to status.
Mr. Mancini, do you have any questions for Mr. Siegel?
I certainly do, and I certainly contest his analysis of the MPC. I'm aware of no single appellate court case that grants an adjoining municipality automatic party status, unlike an individual homeowner, which is applicable, which is prima facie given standing because there's an assumed impact on a single property owner's property. Now, a municipality, unless they can demonstrate, a municipality doesn't have any special standing in zoning cases above and beyond an individual. And unless a municipality can show that they have property that they own or that they control that would be adversely affected by this, I don't understand how it gains automatic party status. If that's the case, every municipality along Darby Creek, all they have to say is, well, you're going to affect the downstream water somehow. I need to be a party to the proceedings, which essentially takes away the ability of Upper Darby to, decide cases within its jurisdiction without the influence from other boroughs and municipalities. So I don't think that saying that Alden Borough is an abutting borough to Upper Darby is sufficient.
So, Mr. Siegel, what is there as part of a specific provision in the MPC that says adjoining municipalities automatically get status?
I don't have the MPC section in front of me, and as you could see, I'm not in my office. However, Alden Borough, in terms of the impact of this development as the adjacent borough, has, as a practical matter, an interest based on the impact on the borough in terms of traffic, water runoff, noise. There's a whole litany of areas where we do. Plus, we have been at a significant difficulty here because I made a right to know request through the Upper Darby zoning board and through Mr. Rongione for information that would also augment our that potentially could have relevance to our status. The request was made, they requested an extension. They did not respond. We have now had to file on a request with the Office of Open Records. The information that's been provided, as Mr. Mcblane said, is limited. But this development would have significant impact potentially on a wide range of areas within the borough and the operations that impact it. So
real quick, sorry. I don't think you submit a right to know request to the zoning hearing board. I think it goes to the township. So I've not been involved with that, nor is the zoning hearing board.
the request was filed in February. The right to know request was filed on February 5th. Initially, there's a right to know request application on the Upper Darby website. We filed it through there. It's been confirmed in multiple ways.
I'm not doubting you filed a right to know. I just, be clear, it's not up to the zoning hearing board. We don't deal with that. And certainly if you get party status, we'll make sure you have whatever documents you need. Go, Mr. Mancini.
And if I might add, if I had known that Mr. Mcblane and Mr. Siegel were parties representing, I'd have been happy to give them our engineered sketch plans. And they're no secret. They're on the board. They're on before the township, and they're identified as exhibits. They're welcome to them. But
all right. Well, let's. I mean, again, anybody who gets party status, we'll make sure you get any and all documents.
But again, if a municipality on the basis of what Mr. Siegel is saying, my goodness, water, everybody downstream is going to, every municipality you have downstream is going to get hit one way or another with upstream development. Although everything's got to be controlled and as part of land development, and that is not necessarily an issue before the zoning hearing board, because before we get to land development and full engineering of these stormwater management facilities, we got to get past you folks, and zoning is not land development. So,
Mr. Siegel, what impacts? Let's see. What are the substantial direct and immediate impacts on Alden Borough? Because you abut the property, right?
The borough abuts the property.
Right. Your client abuts the property.
That's as your counsel. It would address the immediate impact would include areas such as traffic. They would include water runoff to the Darby Creek, impact on public transportation, public safety. I mean, I have a wide range of areas that we would intend to either question or present witnesses on, again, depending on the information that we don't have.
Sure. Madam Chair, I mean, in the year and a half you and I have been doing this together, I mean, we've been pretty open with allowing other municipalities to come in as parties. I mean, Alden does directly abut this property, and there's some information that might need to be teased out here, but I think Alden Borough can be a party if the zoning hearing board so wishes.
Yep, I also agree with that, and
all right.
they can be a party.
All right, so we'll make over the objection of Mr. Mancini, we'll allow Alden Borough to be a party with Mr. Siegel representing them. And again, we'll get Mr. Siegel and Mr. Mcblane any and all documents they need. Is Tiffany Griffin here?
Yes.
Hi. So Ms. Griffin, I understand that you work for Mr. Scott, who is the solicitor for the Borough of Lansdowne, and they've authorized you and your firm to appear here tonight. So tell us what would make the Borough of Lansdowne a party here?
Right. The Borough of Lansdowne is directly adjacent to this track. I think we're divided only by a small body of water of Darby Creek. The Hoffman Park is directly, it's Hoffman Park, the Darby Creek, and then this track. We are neighbors. Our borough owns Hoffman Park, and we are requesting party status as neighbors, as a neighboring borough.
Mr. Mancini, any questions for Ms. Griffin?
Ms. Griffin, what are your specific concerns?
We have three concerns. We're worried about the sanitary sewer capacity and its effect. We're also worried about the Darby Creek stream bank erosion and the quality of life of Hoffman Park, that all are going to be directly impacted by this development.
Again, members of the board, I'm going to object to another municipality that has just general regional concerns that are shared by every municipality, I imagine, with every development that's coming up and down the Darby Creek. And I don't see any basis I didn't see basis for standing with Alden Borough, and I definitely don't see basis for standing for the Borough of Lansdowne.
Ms. Griffin, what's Hoffman Park?
Hoffman Park is the property directly adjacent to this track. It's less than 100 feet from this track, and also by Mr. Mancini's words only five minutes ago, saying that there's case law that when a borough owns property, then they have standing. And I'm telling you that the borough, this park, which is in the property that we own, we have standing just by Mr. Mancini's own testimony moments ago.
All right, so this Hoffman Park is owned by Lansdowne?
That is correct.
All right, and it's directly adjacent to the Thompson Tract or 800 East Providence, the subject property tonight?
That is correct.
Okay.
Are you saying is that the property east of the track down by the creek?
I believe that is west.
West. And it is on the south side of the creek?
It is, hold on, I'm looking at my map. It runs along the creek, actually. It runs along the creek, and the creek, both the track and the park
Runs
share the
along
creek.
which side of the creek?
So the creek would be to the, it would be the park, and then to the park would, looks like to the west, and then the track also to the west.
Mr. Musso, if you allow me to share my screen, I think I have a Google map image of.
That'd be helpful.
I
think you can. I think you're a panelist, so I think you can share your screen. Let me know if you can.
Great.
I believe I can also put.
I also have it too.
All right. So why don't we? Who wants? Ms. Griffin, since it's your situation, why don't you share your screen?
Yes, just a moment.
No, I got it. Otherwise you can't. Almost not connected. So we do share a bandwidth plans.
Oh, Mr. Mcblane
Sorry,
sharing the screen. Okay.
Thank you.
So
All
just this is the Thompson Tract.
Okay. So then the Hoffman Park is right there.
This is Darby Creek. Hoffman Park is right here.
That's on the.
But and if it's helpful at all, Madam Chair, in terms of the Lobs Run interceptor comes through this area, and that is the sanitary sewer interceptor that is owned by the Borough of Alden that connects to the Darby Creek interceptor here. And the sanitary sewage from this area goes to the Lobs Run interceptor into the Darby Creek trunk line. And that is a line that's owned by the Borough of Alden that goes through Upper Darby Township and connects to the Darby Creek trunk line in terms of Alden's connection to the property.
All right, Ms.
All right,
Griffin.
what was that? Lobs Creek, what was the name? Lobs Interceptor, was that word?
Lobs Run Interceptor,
Lobs, L-O-B-B-S?
LOBBS. There's a creek.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I just want to get that word.
Well, again, it appears that the park is on the north side of the creek, Darby Creek, and we're on the south side.
But the parcels do,
Your property comes down to here, Mr. Mancini.
That's true.
the properties
So there,
do.
Coppin Park is adjacent to it.
All right. Well, I look, I think Lansdowne, Madam Chair, has property, owns property directly adjacent to the track, and they've made out a sufficient case to be a party here.
I would agree. I think
All right.
Lansdowne.
So over the objection of Mr. Mancini, the applicant will allow Lansdowne to be a party represented by Ms. Griffin. All right.
Thank you.
Are there, I don't think there's any other attorneys here. So just so that everyone understands, in order to make public comment, you do not have to be a party. So, you do not have to be a party to watch these hearings and at the end of them, make public comment. We're going to allow everybody to say their piece about this. We've really received some comment already. And so I don't want anyone to think that, if you're not a party, you're not involved. You are. We have 3 incredibly capable attorneys here representing a wide swath of people. If there's a case to be made against this application, we have the 3 people to do it. So with that being said, is there anybody else who wants to be a party?
Peter, I did notice on the panel or the, I guess, participants list, there's 2 people with their hands up.
I see that. So I was gonna, so let's do an alphabetical order. So Ms. Armstrong,
Yes,
hi. So you
Hi.
have your hand up. What did you want to
yes.
say?
Well, when Mr. Mancini was questioning Mr. Mcblane about the parties that he was representing,
Mhm.
those particular people represent a group of people from each area. Although, as I said, Mr. Procopio's house is not adjacent to the property, but he represents the whole block of Main Avenue, which the development will be right next to Main Avenue. And the other point that I'd like to make is when we had new construction on Main Avenue that was behind our area, my street, California Avenue, we had to go through a lot of these things, and Alden, Lansdowne, and Upper Darby are all included. So they all will have to participate in the planning of this development. And the other thing, when you were saying about the engineering part will be addressed later, this neighborhood will not be able to tolerate the additional traffic. We have a lot of Okay.
I mean, all right.
we have a lot of
These are comments.
Yeah,
if
these
it
are,
may-
I would agree. These are comments.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
We're
So,
trying
all
to
right.
get to the party
Okay,
status.
thank you for your time.
Sure, Ms. Armstrong, and we appreciate you being here. And again, I think Mr. Mcblane is more than capable of representing everybody in Roselawn and Mr. Procopio and everybody in the Penn Manor area.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I
Ms.
know there's 2 other people. I mean,
Yeah.
again, we're just looking for the party status portion. This isn't a time for comment. So if Michael and Susan, if you're having comments, this isn't the time for them. This is really just if you have something regarding party status.
So Ms. Firth?
Yeah, sorry. I was commenting because Mr. Mancini seemed to make a point about whether individuals were adjacent to the property. And I just wanted to state, Mr. McBlane is representing my husband and I, Susan Firth and David London, who's as members of the Roselawn Civic Association, whose property directly abuts a substantial length of the Thompson Tract. That was my only
We
comment.
appreciate that. And Mr. McBlane is going to do an excellent job in representing.
Thank you.
us. All right. And Mr. Zawajek, sorry for mispronouncing your last name. Go ahead. Oops. Mr. Michael Jozwiak.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? I just have one comment. Well, say not a comment, but in direct, how to say it, comment to Mr. Mancini's objection for the Borough of Lansdowne not being party to this. Just to let you know that the Borough of Lansdowne Hoffman Park abuts to this property in the center of Darby Creek. So
Yeah,
it's not
Ms.
adjacent.
Griffin made that very clear.
No, she said it was adjacent. She didn't say it was abuts. And Mr. Mancini had made a different comment, an objection to that the other at the beginning, that the other parties did not abut this property. However, the Borough of Lansdowne does abut this property in the center of Darby Creek. Just to make that clarification.
And that's why we're glad to make Lansdowne
Okay.
a party. And again, I think Ms. Griffin made that clear, but thank you very much. Okay, and we got one more, Ms. Zerb. Hi, Ms. Zerby.
Hi, thank you very much. My name
Cool.
is Kirby. I'm with Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And I suppose I just wanted to kind of voice consideration for the watershed concept, which sounds like several attorneys have kind of talked about.
And believe me, they have a full time to make a case on all these issues. So we're not, all we've done is establish who's a party and their attorney. So all the details have yet to we go through, but yes.
Correct, because we don't have many details to comment on, but I just wanted to kind of voice out that as downstream, certainly people who live downstream should certainly have party status. It should not be questionable or anything that Mr. Mancini is talking about. It should be very much adequate, especially for a creek like Darby Creek, which is very much a flooding zone. We have riparian areas that have been destroyed for generations, and that's okay. But this area has been seen as great. So I think it's really important that we make sure that everybody is kind of heard from and part of the party.
Agreed. So I appreciate that. You know, we've got our parties, we've got our attorneys, and at the conclusion, we will take public comment. And remember, everyone who's listening, you can also submit written public comment to Pam. I guess it's PAMJ@upperdarby.org. And you know, we'll certainly take into account any written public comment as well. All right, so I think we have our parties, we have our attorneys. Looks like there's nothing else here from the general public. I believe Ms. Dobbins is going to turn off the chat. And again, if you have written public comment, you can email it to us. So with that, Mr. Mancini, the floor is yours to present your case.
Thank you so much. I would like to put an exhibit on the screen because it'll help. I think it will help during the presentation.
I think you have what, about 18 exhibits, right?
Yes, I was thinking of about it. I was thinking of exhibit, I believe 10A, which is the sketch plan for the apartment development.
Okay.
And I'm trying to get the, that's not it.
This is your inbox, so.
Yeah, I know. It's
move away from it.
I had worked it out with Ms. Dobbins, but I do not know. Let me see something here. Let me try that. Binder one. Yeah, here it is. All right, now if I can get to 10A.
And
There.
I'm trying to think of the best way. We have Mr. Chast has set up I think a Google folder with all your exhibits. So well maybe Mr. Chast, well, you say, can you send out a link now? We'll certainly make sure that all the parties get a link after this.
Sure. If it may please the board, before I get into the presentation, I have attached Exhibit 1, which is the proof of posting, and it has the newspaper, the standard picture of the newspaper and the posting when it was made. And I would like to submit that preliminarily. I don't want to bring it up because I'll lose one of these exhibits.
All right. Well, if it's okay with Mr. Mcblane and Mr. Siegel and Ms. Griffin, we'll accept that. I've seen it, and I don't think there's any doubt that the property was properly posted.
No objection.
No objection.
Thank
No
you.
objection.
If it may please the board, Dwight City Group is, like, as previously stated, seeking a use variance to develop this property. It's 800 East Providence Road. The property has approximately 10 acres, and we're seeking to develop it with 14 buildings, which are low. They're the same height of the RC district, the same bulk and area, probably in excess of the RC side yards, for example, rear yards and front yard. And we're seeking to construct the 14 buildings that would have 204 apartment units. I think 6 of the buildings have 18 units in them each, and 8 of the buildings have 12 units in them each. So the smaller buildings are more than the in number than the larger buildings. Now we're talking about luxury transit oriented apartments. We're not looking for FHA housing or anything like that. These are designed to attract transit folks that perhaps live in Philadelphia, use public transportation, and come out and live in the suburbs. In this case, Upper Darby Township. The rentals on these properties their units will be $1,350 for the single bedrooms, and about $1,560 on the double bedrooms. And the size of each of these units are going to range. For the single bedrooms, it's going to be about 800 square feet. For the the 2 bedrooms, it's going to be about 1,000 square feet. So they're going to be very nice units, and we'll get into what we project to be the appearance and look of them, which I think is more like townhouses rather than apartments, and definitely not like the high-rise, high-density apartment units that are located elsewhere in the township. The parcel of land is difficult. It's narrow. It's about at the building lines, it's about 220 feet. It does flare out towards Darby Creek from the eastern boundary, for the eastern boundary, which is the shortest one, as you can see on the exhibit 10A. You're talking about a distance from Providence Road to the Darby Creek of about 1,735 feet, lineal feet. That's 1/3 of a mile. And again, for the bulk of that distance where building construction is proposed, the lot is very narrow, and by comparison of depth to 220 feet. It's mostly 220 feet until you get down to the flag end of it, which then flares out to about 300 feet wide, and it goes down on the shorter side about another 400 feet. We've made efforts to try to stay out of that rear quadrant, which is a substantial amount of the track. The only things that we put in there were 4 or 6 parking lots, which I'm going to explain, and other experts will explain. We're going to try to convince the township if we reach land development, if we get the zoning, that area should be held in reserve, because we don't really need 386 parking spaces. And Mr. Angster will testify as to why we don't, which is required under the multifamily parking requirements of your ordinance. Basically, it requires 2 parking spaces for double bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 1.5 parking spaces for single bedrooms. We put them on there to comply with the ordinance. Again, we will try, if we get past the zoning hearing board, we will, during land development, we will request of the township to allow us to hold those 6 parking lots in reserve, because we don't think it's going to be needed, and we will still have 264 parking spaces or so, which would be about 1.3 parking spaces per unit, which we think, given the nature of the type of residents or tenants we're going to be marketing to, and the encouragement to have only 1 car per unit, would work out very well for us. As I said before, the proposed buildings that are constructed here or proposed, they will all meet and more often exceed, well, they will exceed where critical, the RC bulk and area development standards. For example, RC requires a maximum building coverage of 25%. We will have about 14% building coverage. The RC requires a height of 35. We're trying to keep to that, 35 feet, 3 stories. The ordinance requires that we have a aggregate side yard setbacks aggregate of 35 feet, minimum 15 feet per side, on at least one side. And the other side would have to have 20. We're proposing 30 feet on each side to enable us to have better flexibility for buffering and whatnot. We are not making, number one, we do not know, and we frankly think that spurs from either Roselawn Road, from Arbor Lee to our site has probably been abandoned because it has never been opened. There's no connectivity there. So we're not even looking at, or nor do we want to connect to, the Arbor Lee, Roselawn side. Secondly, we have no desire, nor have we designed for connection to Elm Tree Road. So those residents will not see pass-through traffic unless the township wants us to have pass-through traffic from us. And as far as Main Avenue, there will be no pass-through traffic from us. There might be emergency access provision for that the township may want, but that's something that it's up to them. But from our perspective, we cannot connect to Main Avenue because it doesn't connect to our property. So that the possibility of traffic going to that street is likewise eliminated from our development. The cul-de-sac basically will go out to East Providence Road, and that is a state highway. And we would, of course, if we reach land development process and we get our variance, we would have to deal with PennDOT to get a highway occupancy permit. And that's when you get into the heavy engineering and whatnot. Although our traffic consultant, who's eminently qualified, believes that the site is adequate and can be designed through PennDOT HOP permitting process to accommodate the needs that may exist. So overall, the reason then comes the question, well, why are you going for a variance? Since this property is zoned RC. It's obvious. It can't be built as an RC. It hasn't been built since it's been passed, since the RC zoning district has been designated. Because of the unique features of this property being the extreme length and the narrow width, it cannot be reasonably developed under the standards of the RC. And we'll submit evidence to that effect. And we'll give you an example of a 600-foot cul-de-sac and a 1,400 cul-de-sac. And no matter what density you try to get out of this place, you can't do it for the RC. And we'll also demonstrate that you can't do it for RC1, R1, R2, or R3. And that's why we're going to R4, which allows the multifamilies. We have taken a great deal of design effort to blend this proposed development into the community to minimize impact of aesthetics, height. We will have buffering, we'll have controlled access. And basically, we will demonstrate that this proposed development will not have an adverse impact on stormwater. It will not have an adverse impact ultimately on traffic, as definitely not to the surrounding neighbors, because we will not impact those streets any more so than, if there are cut-throughs being made by the general public, I do not, the folks that will be living in these apartments are again going to be in transit, and they're going to be trying to get to their job sites in the morning and basically living here all the other time. So I don't think they're going to have interest in cutting through neighborhoods. But again, if that happens with the general public, I don't know what to say to that, other than perhaps there could be enforcement by the police for residents only, or something to that effect, similar to some streets around the county. With those preliminary comments aside, I would like to call my first witness this evening, which would be Judah Angster, and then we can get going on all the testimony and the exhibits.
All right. So, Mr. Cochran, please swear in Mr. Angster, I believe it was.
Sir. Sir, do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or so do you affirm?
I do.
All right, thank you.
Take it away, Mr. Meeson.
Thank you. Mr. Angster, do you mind if I call you Judah, or do you prefer Mr. Angster? Just for Judah's fine. Okay. Judah, could you please indicate who you're employed by?
I am employed and run a company called Dwight City Group.
And is it correct, sir, that you are a licensed attorney, a real estate professional, and the CEO of Dwight City Group, LLC?
Yes, it is correct.
And where is the business for, and I'll call Dwight City Group DCG from here on out because it's a shorter reference. Where is DCG located, their business office, that is?
So our main business office is located at 787 11th Avenue on the 10th floor in New York, Given the growth we've had in the MSA.
Well,
Wait a minute. He's a little mumbled. He's breaking up just a little bit. Could you start that answer again, sir? I'm sorry.
and Mr. And Judah, could you keep your pace slower because the court reporter has to record your testimony.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a little shaky.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
No, it's not. It's just the sound. Go
Yeah,
ahead,
Tom Corker gets irate quickly as our court reporter.
no, come on.
So our address is 787 11th Avenue, 10th floor, New York, 10019.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, sir, what are your duties as a CEO? And are you also chief counsel for DCG?
Yes, I'm wearing multiple hats. So I'm CEO and I'm also chief counsel for the company.
And what are your duties as a CEO, sir?
Well, my main duties are to oversee our acquisition strategy, to design the business plan as to which cities and which states to invest in, to identify the right investment criteria, and of course identify the right investors to be a fiduciary for, and to oversee the overall business strategy of the company.
Okay. And by the way, for this particular site, what was the strategy for placing the apartments here, assuming the variance is granted?
So there's a couple elements in particular. In general, we happen to find that Upper Darby's a fantastic town for transit-oriented development. It's located right outside of Philadelphia.
For transit development, did you say so? Okay.
Transit-oriented development.
What's the word after transit?
Oriented.
Oriented. Okay, thank you.
I apologize. My mic is on full. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear it's got like a little bit of a
if you just keep it slow and steady, we'll be all right.
Judah, if you can, is there a way to move the microphone closer to you?
It's embedded in my computer.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can move closer to your computer.
I'll try that. How's this?
All right.
So our main focus has been and always is in transit-oriented communities, right? We believe, and we've seen globally, that car ownership, specifically among the younger generation of professionals, is becoming less and less relevant. They want to be within an easy commute to work. They don't want to be tied down by a vehicle. They also want to use their time while they're commuting to either read a book or listen to something interesting, whether it's music or a lecture. And commuting on public transit lines affords them more flexibility with that time, as opposed to it being devoted to focusing on the road and driving on the highways for long periods. And what we've seen over the past 10 years and what we've seen globally from our analytics is that cities outside of main CBDs, main central business districts, over a long period of time tend to have rapid growth from the younger generation of professionals who don't want to own a vehicle but want the flexibility of being close to the city. Our thought process when we focused on Philadelphia was to look at cities and communities that offer and afford that type of benefit. And within Delaware County, there are several that became the outliers for having this virtue. And Upper Darby was the key city of choice because you happen to have one of the two largest of all SEPTA hubs, transit hubs within the SEPTA lines, centralized in Upper Darby. In addition, there are multiple train lines and bus routes that run directly through this vicinity. And our thought process was, and still is, that if you build a luxurious product, if you build a product that doesn't exist there, and that could be part of the reason why they haven't attracted these younger professionals, then perhaps we can gain the benefit of footing them in a community where their cost of living will be more affordable and more regionally priced than in some of the other neighborhoods outside of Philadelphia that have attracted this population of recent. So for example, if you look at the population, and I apologize if I'm going on a tangent right now, I'm just trying to explain the business thesis behind why we chose Upper Darby and then this track in particular. The business thesis, the communities outside of Philadelphia have had rapid growth. They've had a lot of population growth, they've had business growth, and for some reason, and I think that part of the reason is adequate luxury housing, Upper Darby has not gained from that over the past 10 years. So the population of Upper Darby peaked in the 1970s with 130,000 people, and today it has about 90,000 people. So the infrastructure from that alone, we know can handle it, because it used to have 40,000 more in their population 50 years ago, and now it doesn't. So we know that their infrastructure can handle a couple hundred young professionals. The next question is, well, what about their housing units? Well, today Upper Darby has 38,909 housing units, but 68% of those are single-family homes. And because 68% of those are single-family homes, the amount of apartments that are left, the other 32% of the housing stock in the area, is not adequate because the vintage averaged around the 1970s. There has not been a new multifamily development of sizable scale in Upper Darby since the 1970s. And when you turn to somebody who's making an income above the median income, and they have capital to spend, they have disposable income because they're not, raising children at this period in their life, and they're not being, financially burdened by other obligations, they want to spend a little bit more to get a better product. And because Upper Darby has not built anything since the 1970s, they're skipping over Upper Darby, not intentionally, but just because it lacks the luxury product that they want. So our theory is that if the population used to have 40,000 more people, it doesn't today, is in a superb proximity to a major CBD, a top 10 CBD in the United States, right? And even that CBD has seen a 10% or 11% growth over the past 10 years in population. Then why is it that Upper Darby is missing out on at least a 10% growth? How is it that Upper Darby each year is missing out on this growth? And we believe it comes down to the housing units. The single-family housing stock is averaged from the 1950s or earlier. The multifamily averages from the 1970s. So what that tells us is that there's simply no new product that meets the standards of today's professionals who are willing to spend money to live in somewhere nice.
Okay, sir, I believe we have a Exhibit 5, which is a brochure of DCG, and if I'm not mistaken, it also states the intent and purpose of DCG, and also identifies the various executives and stuff. You've reviewed that exhibit, right?
Sorry,
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Can you pull that up so we can? I think it's
Sure.
exhibit.
It's Exhibit 5.
I think it's 6.
I think it's 5, but
it's this. It's this.
Really, I thought the brochure was. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull up 5. See what that
That's
looks
right.
like.
I mean, you can just click on it. I think right there.
Yeah. Right.
6. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it is Exhibit 5. That is the Exhibit 5 is just a brochure that talks about the business purpose. So I'll skip this. I'll skip to Exhibit 6. Yeah, it's just so it's presented. And now Exhibit 6. What the heck?
I think they might have placed it in Exhibit 7. They might have separated the brochure.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Again, has DCG built other projects elsewhere? Similar, I mean, of multifamilies?
So we've done some work down in Georgia. We've done some work in the Carolinas. Our main focus, DCG is a relatively new branch within Dwight Capital, which is one of the largest HUD lenders in the country. Prior to joining DCG, I was instrumental and oversaw large development, including a tremendous amount of multifamily acquisitions. The stuff that we like to build and the stuff that we built down south and the stuff that we are trying to build today in the Northeast looks very similar to some of the design concepts that you'll see today, which is a garden style, a modern, I should say, garden style apartment development, which lends itself to be a true community. And the reason I say community is if you'll scroll down just a little bit, Mr. Mancini.
Mm-hmm.
Just do one more. One more, perfect. You'll see that one of the key elements of the product that we want to build, okay, and the product that we do build is community space, right? So within the development, we want to make sure that there's enough amenities that the people there don't feel the need to have a full house. When you have your own primary residence, you'll want to have a backyard. You want to have a barbecue section for when your friends come over. You're going to have an area to play with your friends, or to walk the dog, or to play with your children. And here, we want to give people the opportunity to experience all of that without having the financial obligation and the responsibility of maintaining a single-family home all on their own. So this community will happen to have a ton of amenity space, okay? It will have
what kind of space again, sir? I'm sorry.
amenity space.
Amenity space, okay.
Amenity space, right? Including a clubhouse, including walking paths, including an area for folks to have picnics and outdoor dining. It will not have a pool for safety reasons, but it will have a lot of amenity space. It will have a gym, fitness center for folks to feel like they're part of a real community, and also to feel that they have all the standard amenities that people who own single family homes have without the obligation to maintain them. And that is our goal for what we'd like to build on this particular site.
All right. And are the photographs that have been put up there as Exhibit 7, are they representative of what is planned here?
Yes, they are. This is the design team's idea of what we should build for this particular community.
Okay, and in fact, the unit layout that's at the end of this Exhibit 7, is somewhat similar to the one that the longer buildings that's being proposed for this site, correct? The 18
Correct.
part. And this particular layout that I have here, how many units are in here?
Well, just to count them out. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 layouts, and this will go up 3 stories.
So that's where you get.
This is a little bit elongated, but it was done in order to show if we needed to make fewer buildings, that we could actually make fewer buildings if necessary in order to diminish our footprint. Today, by right, the design, the RC allows us to build up to 25% of or 20% of the footprint.
No, actually, you had it right the first time. It's 25%.
25% of the footprint. We're only going to be utilizing 14. And in theory, we'd even like to utilize less. We'd like to utilize a smaller footprint because we don't want to have a significant environmental impact on the area. We want to be conscientious of it, and we want to be mindful that when you're building new product that is up to modern day standards and codes, you have to be able to have a footprint, but how big do we want that carbon footprint to be? So we're trying to design something that has a smaller footprint and enables us to leave more over as perpetual green space for the residents to enjoy and for the community.
And just before we go further with more details about the development, I just want to do some basic preliminary presentation here regarding the deed and the agreement of sale.
Before we go into that, Mr. Mancini, if I could, you're on a wonderful slide. I just want to finish it up for one second.
Go ahead. I'm
okay.
Sorry.
If we could go down a little bit further and we can pause by over there. So freeze, you went too far. Go back up. A little bit up, sir. The American chestnut. Perfect. So we're well aware there are several American chestnut trees on this property right now. We have designed the layouts of the site in order to be able to avoid touching them at all and actually created a circular park around them. So that way, not only are they honored and preserved, but it shows our residents how much we care about our local environment. We've also done some research, and we had our team come up with local, indigenous, native species of different types of plants and trees. And we've designed it, to scroll down a little further, that all of the border designs between the community, okay, will have these trees for your both privacy and also serenity that are going to tree line it. And these are all native trees to the area. So we're not going to bring in anything which could, have a negative impact even on the foliage of the neighborhood. We want the neighbors to be able to look out, and instead of seeing our development, we want them to see a beautiful line of trees that is separating them from this development. Additionally, for our own purposes, if we're offering a tenant a luxury experience, we don't want them to look out from their balcony and see somebody's backyard. That would affect the amount of rent we can charge. So we also want to make sure that we have a beautiful design that they enjoy coming out to and feel like it's peaceful, as opposed to feeling like they're in the middle of a large neighborhood. And with that in mind, we went at great lengths to come up with this design. And if you scroll down a little further, you're going to see a conceptual border design of what we want to draw. A little too far.
Too far.
Yeah, it's right there. Conceptual border design of what we like both our tenants to see as well as the neighbors, as opposed to actually seeing the building.
Okay. And in this regard, the setback from the buildings to the each eastern and western boundary line has been set at 30 feet, correct?
Correct. We expanded the setback because we want to create as much distance as easily possible between these buildings and the neighbors.
Okay, and basically under the RC, the aggregate side yards is 35 feet for a 15,000 square foot lot having public sewers, correct?
Correct.
And there are public sewers here.
Yes, there are.
So if I'm not mistaken, the aggregate side yards for the multifamily standards are probably, or I think even less, if I recall correctly. Now, will this additional side yard enable you to do more by way of plantings and buffering?
That was the intention behind it. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Now, can I go do my paperwork first? Or do you, I just want to establish very quickly, I'm not going to dwell on this. The deed, which is, and I forgot to do this in the beginning because we got sidetracked. The deed is, this property is owned by LMT Group Corporation, correct?
Yes, it is.
And who is the president of this, of the owner?
I believe his name is Frank Alliard.
Okay. And you have entered.
I'm sorry, Fran, who did you say, sir?
Frank Alliard.
Aleardi. Now, sir, you've entered into an agreement of sale with the LMT Group, if I'm not mistaken, and it's been marked as Exhibit 3, correct?
Correct.
Now, the purchaser is named as 800 East Providence Road LLC. Is that an LLC that has been created by DCG?
Yes, we make SPEs, special purpose entities, for each individual projects.
Okay, and basically SDG or DCG is currently the sole and managing member of that LLC, correct?
Correct.
And DCG will basically provide for or generate the funding for the project, and basically will also act as the applicant to secure the necessary zoning and land development if we get that far. Also, it will act as the developer, correct?
Correct.
Now, in the agreement, if it may please the board, I would just point out that there is an addendum attached to this agreement, and it's all the way at the end. Oh, here we are. And the addendum, just the paragraph preceding section 6 clearly authorizes DCG to make application for zoning and land development and all other applications that may be needed. That's solely to establish the standing issue. Now, sir, I also show you what has been marked as Exhibit 3. No, not 3. Exhibit 4, which is a which are two aerials that identify, I think it's 4A and 4B, that identify the location of this property, correct?
Correct.
And basically, the upper aerial identifies it at a lower elevation than the lower aerial photograph and street map. And it does identify the location of 800 Providence, East Providence Road property, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Mr. Musil, I'll object. I think at this point, Mr. Mancini's leading the witness and.
Yep, I am for this. Trying to get through.
All right. Well, I mean, you shouldn't lead the witness, so objection is sustained. Try to rephrase your question.
Mr. Judah, could you please indicate what this top exhibit shows with the red dot?
No worries. It shows this is the lot of 800 East Providence Road, which starts on East Providence and runs all the way back until Darby Creek.
And it goes from left to right. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know what your left and your right is, but it goes from the bottom. I consider it the bottom of that picture, where you have East Providence Road, and it runs all the way back up until where you see the green trees end, Darby Creek begins, and then behind there is the park.
Okay. Now, and that photograph accurately depicts where the property is located.
Yes, it does.
And the lower photograph basically depicts the same property with a wider range of areas. Okay.
Correct. That's more of your aerial snapshot.
Now, returning back to Exhibit 10A. Now, this exhibit has been prepared by Mcblane Engineering, Mr. Dennis O'Neill in particular. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And it was done at the request of the applicant?
Yes, it was.
And Dennis is here this evening and will be testifying on this particular design and plan.
Yes, he is.
Could you, again, generally describe the apartment complex from a number of units to and also the parking space that are provided, and what you would like to do regarding those 6 parking lots that in the back?
Yeah, of course.
So those are here.
So because we focus on attracting transit-oriented professionals, we really don't want our tenants to have lots of vehicles. That's not really the focus. We feel that if they don't have a vehicle, they'll have more disposable income, not just to spend on rent, but to have a better lifestyle. And this location is uniquely situated within walking distance to, I believe it's not 1, but 2 different train stops. It's uniquely situated very close to a lot of bus stations. And our thought process is that we really would not want more than 1 parking space for apartment. And that was our original intention. However, because of the way the zoning ordinance is drafted, we have to present a plan for how we would have adequate parking based off what I think is really an outdated, based off of modern standards of living style. With that in mind, what we did was we used 204 apartments split up by 60% 2 bedrooms, and that comes out to about 120 units. And that would require 240 parking spaces because it assumes that in a 2-bedroom you have 2 drivers or at least 2 vehicles needed for a 2-bedroom apartment. And then the other 40% of those units would be 84 units, would require 126 parking spaces because it assumes that for each 1-bedroom, you're going to have 1.5 vehicles per 1-bedroom apartment. The reason why we think that's not as relevant, and it's based off of our studies and also the fact.
Yes.
I think Mr. Angster is frozen.
Oh, goodness.
If you want to text him, let him know if he's having problems, he can just log,
Yeah, hold on.
he can log back on. Again, his connection doesn't seem to be the best.
I'll give him a call.
What do you need?
I got it. It's always good to have a cell phone
Mhm.
when doing Zoom.
Is Judah up in New York?
I think so. Hey, Judah, you're frozen. Can you, do you want to log off and log back on?
I'm doing that right now. It told me my webinar registration logged me out. It tells me that I got timed out here.
Oh,
Not sure why. Ms. Dobbins, can you
Whoever
assist?
set it up gave me a limited amount of time I was allowed to be on.
oh.
You
Can-
can just re-enter. I've done it.
Can you just re-enter though, and perhaps they can adjust the time allotted to you and we'll move you quicker.
Yes. I'm going to work on that right now.
All right, thank you.
You got it.
Hmm.
Is he,
I'm
Still
back.
there? Okay, there we go. Mr. Angster?
All right. Thanks for having me back.
somebody's got him muted.
No. It's funny. There's a blank screen that's muted, but then you're live and in much better quality. So we'll just go with that.
All right.
All right.
So why don't you start repeat your last question, repeat the last answer.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
I think I had said, could you generally describe the apartment development, the use that they're seeking and also the parking issues?
Right. So we started talking about the parking and essentially what we had to design here was a total parking space of 366 spaces, which is far in excess of what we'd like to build. And it's way more parking than what is necessary for a modern community. And so what we pretty much are doing is we're creating a design which complies with all the RC zoning, but then we'd like to take these 6 parking stalls in the back and leave them as green space and say, listen, we don't want to develop this. We don't think it'll have a good impact on the area. We think it's much better if we just leave it as ground space the way it is.
To move your cursor up, I think you put it on that X, it'll get rid of that.
Sorry,
Sorry, there's somebody else that needs your mic on.
somebody else talking?
Okay. And what that could do is allow us to have more green space and really gear the tenancy towards folks who don't rely upon multiple vehicles. So one of the ways we can motivate that is even without the 6 parking stalls in the back, we'll have more than 1 space per vehicle. I mean,
those are actually, excuse me, Mr. Judah, those are not stalls. They're actually parking lots. And I think the bottom 4 parking lots hold 18 parking spaces apiece. And
I'll object. Is Mr. Mancini testifying at this point, or is
sure.
Mr. Angster still
Mr.
testifying?
Angster, could you please tell us how many parking spaces are in each one of those parking lots in the back?
The parking lots in the back hold a total of about 102 spaces, I believe. And so from those 102 spaces, we would provide 260 parking spaces for the 204 apartment units, and the 102 in the back, we would leave in reserve and try not to touch or utilize them all.
And that would be at the township's discretion if there's
Correct. They could always come to us at a later date and say, hey, you need to start adding more parking, and we'll gladly comply. But until then, we'd rather just leave them as green space. Correct.
And again, that would be whether you're even allowed to have the reserve would be at the township's discretion during land
Completely.
development.
It's up to the township to make that discretion. This is what
Okay.
we're requesting because we want to have a location that has a lighter impact on our local environment.
Now, sir, the multifamily development standards restrict efficiencies to 20%. Do you have any efficiencies proposed in this
No.
development?
No, this development will be exclusively 1-bedroom apartments and 2-bedroom apartments. We do not build efficiencies and we do not build 3-bedroom units.
What?
We find that, well, I'll tell you why. So the turnover ratio, how many tenants turnover in a building is based off of not just location, but it's also based off the type of apartments you're offering. If you offer a lot of efficiencies, you generally attract people who have, statistically this is speaking, a higher turnover ratio. So if you have a building of efficiencies of studio apartments, your turnover ratio on average is going to be 50%. Turnover ratio for 1-bedroom apartments is a little bit higher than that. It's like 60 to 65%. Turnover ratio for 2-bedroom apartments is like, sorry, let me reduce that. The turnover ratio for studios is 50%. The turnover ratio for 2-bedroom apartments is 35%. If for 1-bedrooms is 35%, and the turnover ratio for 2-bedroom apartments is 25%. So the idea is that if you build 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms, you reduce the amount of people who are moving in and out each year. And what that does, the cause is that it allows people to stay longer within a community. And when they build friendships within that community, they're more hesitant to leave and they want to stay longer. And as a landlord, the last thing you want is tenants to move in and out each year. The longer a tenant stays with you, the more they take care of the property, the better a neighbor they are to the other residents, and the easier it is for you as a landlord in terms of your expenses and your costs in maintaining the property.
By the way, the ordinance doesn't define efficiency. What is an efficiency in the industry?
A standard industry standard for an efficiency means that you have one large room, and that's your sleeping quarters, that's where you're eating, that's where your kitchen is, and then you'll typically have a small bathroom off to the side with its own door.
Okay.
But that's about it. It's a 1-room apartment.
Now, you indicated that if we eliminate, or not eliminate, we hold in reserve the 6 rear parking lots, we basically hold back 102.
We will still have 260 parking spaces for the 204 apartments. So we'll still have well above 1 parking space per unit for the building.
Okay. Will this all stormwater management, however, all the facilities, would they be designed to include and handle runoff for the full 366 parking spaces?
Yes, they will, and that's what was designed by our engineers.
Or it will be designed if it's.
Will be designed by the engineers. That was designed in the layout.
Okay.
Correct.
And I think we already talked about the compliance with the bulk and area setback requirements and heights requirements of the RC district. But let's go through them. We're talking about the RC requires 35 foot of height, and that's where we're trying to stay at, correct?
Yes, we've actually sat down with our architect even before we began this endeavor, and we said, look, we want to create something that's valuable as an asset, but also valuable to the community. Okay. And the last thing I would want to do is build a building that is, multiple stories above the rest of the neighborhood. So we looked at the RC district requirements and we tried to design a residential community that matches those requirements or exceeds those requirements in benefit to the local community.
And the building coverage, I think you already indicated it's 25%.
But we're only using 14%. The height is going to be stuck at 35 feet, which is the current requirement. We've also increased the setbacks on all of the yardage. So if anything, we're building on a smaller footprint than we would have by right. We're leaving more side yardage than we would have to by right. And we're also keeping the height to the same standard that we're required to. In a sense, I could make these all single family homes. but then they would lose a lot of money.
Well, we'll get into that through your consultants as well. Have you had your engineer, Dennis O'Neill, of the McCombie office prepare estimated required site improvements? And I'll get into greater details with him.
Yes, we did. And we reviewed the financials and the site requirements back and forth to see what would make sense. And this, unfortunately, is the only financial solution that makes this plot a feasible development site.
And do you recall what the projected site improvements are for the this apartment development?
Yeah, we estimate that the total development site costs, and this is just site costs alone, will be $8,240,782.83. We also like to point out that when we did our site cost analysis, we used the land as a zero basis, which means we assumed that we got the land 100% for free in order to assess whether or not it would make sense to develop this. So the purchase price has zero relevance to our argument today.
Did the site cost evaluation consider or include soft costs like engineering for land development, if you get that far, or
No,
applications, permit fees, and
no, it did not. It absolutely did not. It was completely hard cost alone. Because if we included soft costs, we were concerned that people would complain, hey, you're just paying your architects or engineers too much money. So we literally just used what are today's hard costs. And I'd like to point out a few things talking about hard costs. Metal is up 45% from pre-COVID. Lumber's up 300% from pre-COVID. There is not a single developer today, okay, who would take a look at this site and try to touch it doing anything.
I will object, Madam Chair. Mr. Director, is expressing an opinion for which he's not been qualified, for which there's no basis or foundation that's been laid.
Mr. Mancini, what's your response to that?
I'll lay the foundation. I mean, the guy's in development and construction, he's going to be aware of increases in materials. And we're not applying technical rules of evidence here. Otherwise, we'd be here all night.
Look, I mean, try to lay some more foundation, but
Sure.
Be clear, Mr. Angster is an expert.
You'd like to hear my background?
Mr. Angster, in your capacity of site location and site development and Jack, and your involvement with DCG, do you have to be aware of the construction material costs out in the world when you look at projects?
Absolutely. So let me give you some background. So before I started Dwight City Group, okay, I ran a company called Castle Rock Equity Group, which was the real estate investment arm for PCS Wireless.
All right, I'm sorry, sir. Castle Rock, did you call it? Was it?
Castle Rock Equity Group. I ran Castle Rock Equity Group for 3 years. Prior to that, as an attorney, I was head of their mergers and acquisitions. So I spent about 7 years running up their mergers and acquisitions division. And during that time, I spent 3 years running Castle Rock, where we focused on acquisitions of multifamily, development, joint ventures. Of note, I'll just tell you a few of our transactions. I oversaw and ran point on the largest, or at the time it was the largest land grab in Nashville history, buying 3.5 acres in downtown Nashville with 1 million buildable square feet by right. I oversaw the acquisition of the Icon in Philadelphia for $112 million. I oversaw a joint venture to put up over 500 units in Brooklyn with a company called Hello Living. And I built out a team.
I'm sorry, sir.
All right.
It's not you speaking. It's just that little bit of an echo in the back or something that's hurting a little bit. Go ahead.
Mr. Angster, basically, in all your experience and functions, when you try to evaluate the feasibility of a project, are you aware of the materials costs in the industry, including lumber, steel, hardware, bricks, whatever?
Yes, I get very cranial because the devil is in the details. And if you don't know what hard costs are going into a site, you cannot afford to run the risk of bidding on that property.
Or buying it. Is that Mr. Mcblane, is that sufficient basis for you?
Well, for what, Mr.
I mean, look, I think you've laid a foundation So construction costs have gone up. Let's move on.
Yeah, that's, okay. I'm sorry, you had said that the construction costs have gone up.
Correct.
And that's
Cost
going
of
to,
lumber,
that's going to drive up the
cost of
price of it. How much will it cost that when you said site improvement costs, you're talking about just site preparation, correct?
Correct.
And
Correct. We're talking about site preparation. We're talking about prior to building up, meaning going vertical. So this is prior to going vertical on the site. This is just site preparation costs. We estimate that it's going to cost us over $8 million before we can even go vertical.
without soft costs.
Correct.
All right, now, what do you project the cost of constructing the 14 buildings and 204 units?
Fantastic. So this number, by the way, is very aggressive, and we've gone to multiple GCs and we've worked very hard on this number. I hope you can hear me okay, Tom.
Okay, going to see, you used initials or something there.
GCs, general contractors.
GCs, okay, thank you.
I apologize.
Right. You're
We've gone
good.
to multiple general contractors and we've explored how can we build a product with costs going up the way they have been, that folks can still afford to rent out, and it could be nice, right? It could look luxurious. The reason I say that is because if you go to develop in almost any area today, and you're trying to build a ground up development site, the average cost will be north of $200 a square foot, not including site improvement, just your hard cost on material and labor. We have to be below that in order to make this site work. We've worked with a few GCs, general contractors, and we've come up with a few strategies, and sorry, it's our own strategy, so I don't have to share it with you today. But we believe that we can build this site at $153 a square foot, okay? And with the 2 bedrooms being about 1,000 square feet, the 1 bedrooms being 800 square feet, the total building footprint, because the way it's designed, will have very few hallways. Every 6 units will basically have their own entranceway. It feels like they're going into a small house, but yet they're all interconnected. And what we avoid doing is having a lot of lost space and having long corridors or long hallways that are wasted space. And with that, the total building footprint of the total site will be 64,400 square feet. And times by 3 stories, it'll be 193,200 gross square feet. And that will cost us at $153.30, approximately $29,610,000 of actual building costs, not including site work, not including soft costs, just hard costs for constructing the apartments.
Okay, and how much? And I think we already. How much will each apartment be leased for? By the way,
we're going to lease. Well, we would like to. We hope to lease the 1-bedroom apartments for $1,350 and the 2-bedroom apartments for $1,560.
Okay, in current market, are these relatively competitive rental rates for the type of construction you're building?
No, these are definitely going to be higher watermarks for this particular area. There's a few apartment complexes along East Providence Road, and when we looked at the comps of what the neighboring apartment buildings are going for, these rents are going to be on average 30% I would really say higher than everything else in the market. So it's going to be a high watermark for the neighborhood.
Okay, now, in addition to the financing carry for the site improvement costs and for the build out, which doesn't include soft costs and the land or anything like that, because you said that's kept out, are there going to be post-completion operational costs?
Absolutely. These communities do not run themselves. You need to have a great staff. You need to reward your staff and pay them well. Because if you don't, you just can't afford to maintain that standard. So we plan on having a manager, on-site manager. We plan on having a leasing agent. We plan on having handymen. We plan on having full-time porters. We estimate that our salaries alone, not including payroll tax and everything else, will be north of $250,000 a year, if not more. And on top of that, that doesn't include water and sewer, which is always paid for by the landlord. It doesn't include common area electric.
So how much is the water and sewer annually?
We estimate we estimate that between water, sewer, and common area electric, we're probably going to have to pay $750 per unit, which comes out to about $153,000 a year of landlord carry costs for those utilities. And then on top of that, we assume the taxes on this site, which are de minimis today, are going to go up substantially higher to about at least $1,000 a unit, if not more. Specifically, Delaware County happens to have a higher tax rate than some of the other areas. So we're estimating that the taxes here will be well north of $1,000 per unit.
If you're fortunate. How about taxes? I'm sorry, how about insurance? Do you have that?
Yes. The insurance is typically about, for new development, insurance is a little bit more affordable because we have modern fire safety standards. So the insurance will probably be about $300 per unit for $61,200 per year. And then you have ongoing maintenance and repairs.
Wait. Before you leave the insurance, what additional safety design features will these units have?
So what we do with our current communities is we create a key fob system. So like I said, the entranceway is going to be unique, right? It's only going to be for each 6 units that there's a separate entranceway. And there'll be a key fob there. So if you're not a resident of that 6 units, you're not even able to get into the building, right? That's step number 1. Step number 2 is that our hope is that at the front entrance, we'll have some sort of monitoring gate. I would really like to have something, maybe it could be a little bit in, and we have to figure out the design that creates additional features of safety and security for the residents. Because especially when you build something with a lot of really nice community space and common area amenity space, you do get folks who try to come in who aren't residents to enjoy that space. So the more secure we create this, the better environment we'll create for the residents, and the safer it will be for everyone.
How about from a fire or,
I mean, the standard, the codes today for fire and safety are pretty robust. I mean, there's no way in the world we would compromise on any of that. We would try to make this as energy efficient as possible and reduce the amount of utilities that are utilizing gas. So that way it would be more on an electrical grid as opposed to utilizing natural gas. That could also help reduce some of the fire safety issues because it just creates a lower likelihood of having additional hazards within the community.
Okay, are there, in addition to the insurance, are there other continuing monthly costs and repairs?
Everything from snow plowing in the wintertime, landscaping in the summertime, your general maintenance and repairs typically average about $800 per unit for a site like this. So it would come out to about $163,200 per year. And then ongoing maintenance and upgrading will probably be another $250 per unit. Typical lenders actually reserve that each year to make sure that you're taking care of what we call your capital improvement requirement. And that'll come out to another $51,000 per year on top of that.
Now, Judah, based on the site improvement cost estimates, the actual vertical construction, the ongoing maintenance, and which all are pretty conservative from what you have said, because a lot of expenses have been excluded. What, in your opinion, is the 204 apartment units proposed the minimum amount needed to afford to afford relief for this development to occur?
So I'll go into that. We reviewed, originally we were asking for more units. And when we understood that the neighbors were concerned, we really sat down as ethical professionals and said, how can we build something that still makes sense for us, makes sense for the community, and at the same time it's just a little bit less. And we really tried to squeeze it down, which is how we got to 204. That was not our initial intention. We reduced it because we do want to be mindful of our neighbors. And we felt that, at 204, we can afford to take the business risk to develop this location, but we really can't afford to shave off much more than that. I mean, if we would, it would be a bad business decision. And ultimately, we'd be breaking our fiduciary obligation to our investors if we tried to do anything further.
In other words, if you dropped the number below this?
Yeah, in layman's terms, if we built less units, we'd lose money.
So, okay. And of course, for the first couple of years, are you just about are you breaking even or are you just doing a little bit above that?
First couple of years, our build to cap rate is basically going to be on 50 to 75 basis points higher than what market value is, which is pathetic. You really need 125, 150 basis point spread to take development risk. We don't have that spread on this particular site. So the first couple of years, it's going to be very, very close until we stabilize the rental income and slowly increase it over time. Yes.
All right. Sir, do you understand this property is zoned RC residential, correct?
Yes, I do.
Again, in your opinion, which will be developed in greater detail, can this property be feasibly developed for RC development?
I would object. He's being asked to state an expert opinion again, and he's not been qualified as an expert.
Okay, well, he
All right.
he is not built. You're correct. He is not building the RC development, and I will reserve that for follow-up testimony.
I think we hired some experts to focus specifically on how we got to this level where we need to build this many multifamily. So I'll let them talk to it if you like. But yes, we explored every single possible option from RC all the way up to R4. And every single one, unfortunately, failed the financial litmus test of does this make sense?
So it failed the what, sir?
Financial litmus test.
In other words, the cost was prohibitive.
Correct.
That is the cost of development.
To explore an opportunity other than R4.
And that's even without allocating any value to the land acquisition.
We gave zero value. We gave zero value to the acquisition for each stage as we explored all of our options.
All right, and you're gonna have some other expert. Is it tonight, Mr. Mancini, or is that the next?
Well, we will have Dennis O'Neill set forth all of the specific costs for the various developments and for the various length of cul-de-sacs, and he will be on for quite a bit.
Okay.
And then, well, then we'll take it with the other. We'll take the feasibility testimony with other experts that will follow. By the way, sir, do you know when this property was first zoned RC Residential Conservation District?
So the best guess we have is that sometime about 40 plus years ago, it was changed to RC. It had been a farm prior, and at some point it was changed to, it was rezoned to RC. But I mean, the data out there is just so ancient that there wasn't really much to pull from.
Now, so this property has been zoned RC
at least for 40 plus years, yeah.
And are you aware of any development that has occurred on this property?
No, I mean, this site is pretty much untouched. Yeah.
In the last 40 years, have there been, to your knowledge, which is within your expertise, have there been upcycles in land development and building of
Absolutely.
Family?
I mean, look, we had just in 2008, we had a major cycle that crashed, right? And then coming out of 2008, prior to COVID, we had tremendous build and boom. I mean, downtown Philadelphia, the entire skyline was completely changed.
And that's just recent history.
And that's in recent history. But if you look around overall, housing has actually really become a much more robust portion of the market nationally. And most towns, and this one brought us back to Upper Darby, you know, we were buying stuff in Jersey City, right outside of New York, and we saw that stuff pricing was just going out through the roof. And I said right away to my partners, I go,
I'm sorry.
I'll go slower, Tom.
No, right outside of Jersey, out of New York, and we saw that. Then I kind of lost it.
That construction was going up, and pricing costs were going through the roof. They were becoming really, really expensive. So we decided that we should go to a city that we thought had the same value and find similar neighborhoods to Jersey City. And we believed that Upper Darby possessed all those great attributes. So in 2017, we began looking for neighborhoods like Upper Darby to develop it. And this became a pursuit of how do we find the next Jersey City that becomes part of the New York City skyline? What's going to become the next part of Philadelphia's skyline? And we felt that Upper Darby should be that city. It made perfect sense for us. But the problem was, and the problem still is, that there's a prohibited zoning in the areas which are ripe for development. In this particular case, the site is ripe for development, in our professional opinion. It has great commuter access, but the zoning is so financially prohibitive that there's nothing you can do with the land. It becomes almost useless, which is why no one has tried to build anything on it, or if they have, it hasn't been passed because it requires a significant variance. Now, from our research, we understand that this particular site.
What was that?
Interject an objection.
Go ahead.
Sorry, who's objecting?
I'm Dan Siegel.
Hey, Mr. Siegel, what's your objection?
This testimony is purely speculative. He's guessing as to why others may or may not have developed here. He has no records. In fact, I've asked for all of those records relating to development of the property since its last zoning in 1985, and the open records request hasn't been answered. But he's offering nothing but his pure speculation. There's no basis for him knowing what any other developer did or didn't do other than what may be in a public record. And he hasn't even referred to that.
If I may,
what's your
it's very
response?
simple. He's basically testified that this ordinance has been in place for about almost 40 years or who knows more. There's been no development, even in upswings in development cycles. And there's been huge demand for single family and no development. And in his opinion, he's indicated that the property cannot be developed under the current zoning. And
I object. That's not what he's testified to.
That's exactly what I'm testifying to.
Excuse
Well,
me,
can
Mr.
we-
Gangster, there's an objection. You're not to speak right now.
Okay, all right, well.
Madam Chair, Mr.
Hold
Amuso,
on.
he has not testified to
Yeah,
that. He's not been qualified to testify to that.
I understand what you're saying. All right, so, Mr. Mancini, you understand the
I'm going-
objection?
I understand the objection, and I think the qualifications of his familiarity with developments and analytical abilities to evaluate sites and municipalities has been established. And whatever he's testified to, I will, I'll let the record speak for itself on that matter.
All right, well, I think, look, I think we can agree that the property hasn't been developed. And
Well, Mr. Musso, I would object to that. I don't think that's the case. I mean, that's
has
so.
it? I mean, I don't.
Yeah, that was Mr. Angster's testimony thus far, but I would, ask you to reserve stating that as a fact until there, because by way of offer of proof, the testimony will show that this property has been subdivided and developed, for houses that are would be in conformity with the RC zoning.
With this particular parcel in question, with this configuration, John, you show me where it's been developed.
All right,
We will, Mr. Mancini.
Well, good.
Look, hey.
I'm not talking about surrounding farms.
All right, everybody stop. So, all right. I agree that Mr. Angster can't be, thinking about what other people were thinking. But I don't know, is there any evidence that there are buildings built on this property? I understand what you're saying, that they've been subdivided, perhaps preparations are there and they could be built, but I don't think there's any doubt that there have not been built.
Well, let me clarify this. Mr. Angster, has there been any roads constructed on this development?
No, there's just a driveway, a little entry driveway to a single family home in the front.
Has there been any, have you walked this property and visually inspected it
Many
closely?
times. I walked the property with my entire
Okay.
team.
Have you seen any evidence of disturbance for foundations?
No, I have not.
Any
No,
evidence of disturbance for stormwater management facilities?
certainly not. No.
Is the property pretty well treed or overgrown?
Yes, it's heavily forested. It's heavily forested, and there's this one section in the main plot that is actually mostly grass. But then once you get to the back, it's completely forested. You wouldn't be able to.
Did you see any evidence of development on this 10-acre tract?
Not at all.
All right.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Angster, I'd like to go to the next category. Could you please state for the board how you believe, or in your opinion, the township would benefit from this development?
Right. So from our perspective, and obviously this is just my opinion of how it can benefit the township, right? There hasn't been significant development in the township since the 1970s. There
For
hasn't
resident,
been
for
an opportunity
residential, excuse me.
for multifamily residential dwellings, correct?
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. I'm-
There has been over 2,000 people who left this town.
sorry.
Mr. Angster, I'm sorry, you
I'm sorry.
froze again. Why don't you repeat your answer in full?
Okay, I'll start again. I'm unfrozen this time, right?
Yes, I can hear you and see you, so go ahead.
Okay, great. From our perspective, there has to be a way to gain back the population that's been lost since the 1970s. There has to be a way to create new housing stock that hasn't been present since the 1970s. And from our perspective, if you build quality product that looks beautiful, that's new, that has amenity space, you begin to attract people with disposable income who can spend more in the local economy. They can afford to go out to restaurants. They can afford to go to the theater. They can afford to go down the block and spend a little bit more in their shopping experience. And although that doesn't exist necessarily as much today as it should, we believe, and we believe with great vigor, because we're willing to take financial risk to prove our point, that if we build a high quality luxury product in this neighborhood, we can attract income earners that exceed the median income of Upper Darby. According to the last census.gov, the median income of Upper Darby is $52,274. The per capita income is only $29,457. So that means that we have to be certain in our convictions that we can attract individuals with a per capita income grosser than $29,457. And I think that if you build quality product, you can. The average home value in Upper Darby is $151,000. That's not a great deal of money. But if we build higher quality product and people begin to move in, then the average home value will raise. And as home values raise, taxes generated from the values of the home can also be raised. So not only will we be helping the tax burden of the community when we come in and build a better product, but people who are looking to be empty nesters, instead of them having a suppressed value for their property, all of a sudden can sell their home at a higher value. And the town can then increase the taxes on that residential home as well, proportionately to the new sale. And what that will do is it'll create an influx of cash overall that benefits the community. Without us coming in and willing to take the financial risk, this site will continue to generate the same tax revenue it's been generating for the past 40 years, which is de minimis. And on top of that, the town will miss the opportunity to build something to attract higher income earners back into their city.
Now, sir, apart from the I guess the global plan expectations, are there specific benefits generated by this development in the terms of, construction jobs?
Yeah, we only hire local. I can tell you that the projects that we're working on in the Philadelphia market, the general contractors are all local general contractors. The employees and staff are local. We do not ship in and bring in people from New York and New Jersey or other areas. Everybody we work with is local. And our philosophy is simple. We want to think local, but we want to work local. We want to be part of the community. We want to add benefit and value to the areas that we're investing. Because if we continue to add benefit and value, and it's a selfish theory, if I add more value to where I'm investing my capital, then my return on investment will continue to grow. And if I keep to that philosophy, that means that when I build a site like this, I want to make sure that as much as possible, the jobs are going to people who are living in the local economy. I want to make sure that every single person we're buying product from that goes into this site is a wholesaler within the local area. I don't want to ship it in from out of town. I really want to make sure that I'm reinvesting into this local neighborhood.
Now, sir, if the township has gross income taxes or net income taxes, people that are living there would also be paying those taxes. Is that correct?
Correct. I'm not aware of exactly what the town taxes per se or doesn't tax per se, But
Okay.
everybody who's going to be involved in this development, whether it's the construction portion or later on the management and employee portion, are all going to be local, and they're all going to be putting money back into the local economy.
Okay, including the people who reside there.
Absolutely.
Now, have you, in addition to the real estate taxes that you had previously addressed, you're aware that there would be permit fees involved if this development is approved and you have to build it out?
I'm going to object as to the relevance to the zoning issues
I
of
think
the
it-
value of permit fees.
I think it goes to the benefit that's generated for the community and for the municipality under the variance. I'm just trying to show that it's not going to be detrimental.
Permit fees really aren't a source of revenue.
All right.
Objections.
Mr. Angster, do you have any other positive features that you, in your mind, that would be good for the community and for the township?
Yes, and I'd just like to say it like this. You know, today you have an environmentally conscious developer. I went to Pace Law School, which is one of the top law schools in our country for environmental law. We care about the economy and we care about the environment. And from our perspective, if we're able to preserve the American chestnut trees, if we're able to create as much green space as possible on this site, if we're able to create local jobs, then we're adding a net value to the community. And today, that's what is being offered on the table at a very big financial risk to us as a company. I don't know where the world is going. I hope we don't have another resurgence of COVID, but if there is another economic slump, and economic cycles are, guaranteed, when there is one, I just hope that this site doesn't get utilized for something other than what we're proposing today. Because I really studied it for a while, and I think this is the best possible use for the site and for the community. Because it honors the chestnut trees that are protected and need to be preserved. It creates as much green space as possible. And we were very careful about our carbon footprint in how this property is being built out and laid out.
Mr. Angster, in conclusion here, does the property, in your opinion, as a developer and who's analyzed the sites for development, does the property suffer from any particular physical hardship?
Yes.
Because of its size, depth, configuration, and other features?
There's multiple issues with the configuration, but the most challenging portion is not just that it's narrow and long, it's the steep sloping in the back. And we would never want to try to disturb that steep slope. So everything we design looks like it's really pushed forward towards East Providence, because we want to try to stay as far away as possible from that backside that connects to Darby Creek. So it's really a complicated plot, and we felt that this design was the most sensitive to the local environment.
Is this property, in your opinion, uniquely affected by all these features?
Absolutely. Under the law of situs, every property is uniquely different, and our thought process is that this location is particularly challenged. And so the only way to really develop it is to be very careful and to focus on the front portion. But that, of course, leaves an entire multiple acres, which we really would not want to develop on, and we'd rather leave as green space.
In your opinion, because of these hardships, can the property be developed in conformity with the existing RC district zoning?
We looked at every single design that was presented to us by Dennis and by the other professionals we retained, and one after another, it did not make any financial feasible sense. And as a company, we would never pursue any of those other options.
Has the unique hardships of this lot been in any way created by the owner or prior owner of the appellant?
No, these are simply the natural topography of the land. This is how the ground flows. It's how the environment is. It's how the lot lines were drawn when this was carved out. Nobody did anything to create this hardship. It's just the way the lot is designed.
Now, and finally, if the variance is granted as requested, does it represent the minimum variance needed to afford relief and represent the least modification possible for the regulations at issue?
Yes, from our perspective, yes. This is the least we can request in order to afford relief. Absolutely.
Mr. Angster, you realize that you know, even if you get the variances, it's only a starting point. And that you do have to go for land development. You have to go for third agency approvals, which include DEP, PennDOT,
Right,
sewer authorities, et cetera.
right. Yes, we're well aware. This is just the beginning.
All right. I have no further questions of this witness, and I would move I would move exhibits 1 through 1 through 7 into evidence and reserve the other exhibits for expert qualification.
All right, so first, are there any objections to admissions of exhibits DCG 1 through DCG 7?
I guess Mr. Musso, may we reserve our objections? I don't believe I have an objection.
Yeah, no, I agree. That makes sense. So the parties can, reserve their objections for now. If you think you have an objection at a later point, we can deal with it then.
Thank you.
That applies to all.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right.
Now then,
Go ahead, Mr. Mancini.
my next witness,
Whoa. We got to cross-examine, right?
oh, I'm sorry. Go cross-examine away.
All right, we'll do in the same order. Mr. Mcblane, he's your witness.
Excuse me,
Okay.
before we get into cross-examination, could we take a 5-minute quick break?
Sure. Any objection to that from anybody? All right, so let's take
Thank you.
5-minute comfort break, and we'll be back. We'll make it at 9:15.
No.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Musso, I'm sorry. Do we have, while Mr. Mancini, did we lose him?
We did, but what's up? Well, all right. Let's just talk at 9:15. All right.
Yep.
Oh my God, that feels better. Mute myself. Oh, shit. What did I just do?
You just got rid of your exhibit.
Oh, okay. I think now I can mute.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you there, Judah.
No, I apologize, Tom.
No, it's just you got to really listen. No, you're fine. You speak very clearly and all, but it's just, man, you just got to really listen.
There's just
I
some kind of
apologize.
echo where you are. That's the
It's just a tad. If you were in the same room with me, I'd be loving you. Not that I don't like you now.
You know what it is?
Just all of you.
You know what it is? I think your room has no buffering in the walls, and there's like an echo effect in there.
It was built in the 1930s, see?
All right. Oh, geez. No, Vincent's
right.
all right.
Hold on.
Vincent's all right. I like Vincent. He's all right.
So,
Well,
of the-
Vincent,
So our members are back.
okay.
Um, yeah, all right. Okay, I think it's 9:16. Everyone's back. Mr. Mancini, before you left, Mr. Mcblane wanted to say something, but rather than risk an ex parte communication, we waited.
All right ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. McBlane.
Well, just Mr. Meeser, for planning purposes, myself and the other counsel cross-examined Mr. Angster. I guess was the board planning on then? Mr. Mancini's indicated that I think he said his next witness would be Mr. O'Neill, would be quite lengthy. Is there just for planning purposes?
Sure. So the chair, if I make a mistake, I'm sure she'll correct me. You know, we had talked about looking to see where we were at 10 p.m. and whether it made a point to stop there. I think we're willing to go to 11 if necessary, but I agree it may not make sense depending on where we are. So I don't know if it's anything to say. I mean, let's get through the cross of Mr. Angster and see where we are. We might end there. I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Mancini?
I'm amenable to whatever if we have enough time, but I don't know how much I'll be able to get through with Mr. O'Neill, but I can certainly start if it's necessary.
Yeah,
All right, so let's go ahead.
I was going to say maybe beneficial because, as I said, I know myself and Mr. Siegel had made right to no request to get the zoning application and any exhibits, and I was able to obtain the application, but as I understand, I'm not sure whether that was the first. I got one that was filed in February, so it sounds like there was a prior application to that, and then perhaps a subsequent
I don't think
amended?
there's a subsequent one. So the one you have in February, I would say, is the current application. I think what
Yeah.
Mr. Mancini was saying is they've come down a
We
little
scaled
bit on
down.
some of those numbers, but that doesn't, I mean, the application was for the numbers.
Okay.
So.
And then there's been the indication that there is the exhibits, especially before we get into Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Mancini's done a fantastic job of putting those exhibits up, but with my advanced age and my trying to look at those land development plans on my screen, it might be beneficial to the parties to have those exhibits so we can kind of follow along with Mr. O'Neill through his
All right.
testimony.
So why don't, absent
Would agree.
objection from the board, why don't we do the cross-examination of Mr. Angster? I mean, look, the board, I'm sure, is going to have some questions for Mr. Angster, and then we can end there, and we'll agree on a date that works for everybody, and then Mr. O'Neill will kick us off on that date. Does that make sense to everyone? Anyone
Sure.
disagree?
Does to me.
All right.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And just to be clear, I think we only received the exhibits on Wednesday. So I know,
That's correct.
when you say you tried to get the exhibits, I don't know that they existed prior.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Yeah, that's not what I meant. If that's the way it came out, the township did provide me with what I believe it had at the time, but
Yeah.
now we come to the meeting, and it's difficult enough with Zoom. Normally Mr. Mancini's fantastic. He would have a whole package of binder.
Right. We'd all get the
Exactly.
binder. We'd all sit there with the binder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I like these Zoom hearings even less than you, John, but that's the reality of the world today. And I would say that the Madam Chairwoman is correct. What was submitted as an application was purely architectural conceptual. And I fully recognize that we needed much more than that for the zoning hearing. And there have been engineered sketch plans developed because of that. So, and that was just recently concluded and just recently submitted. So.
Okay.
But
All right. So let's get
right.
through Mr. Angster if we can, and Mr. Mcblane, he's your witness for cross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Amuso. Mr. Angster, do you agree that you submitted a cover letter with the application to the zoning hearing board on February the 2nd, 2021? And in that cover letter, you indicated that your opinion was the cost of construction is far too expensive to build anything other than multifamily.
Well, yes.
And I will attempt to share my screen here, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
And what I'll ask to be marked is R exhibit R1 for Roselawn 1.
All right, this will be R1 or Roselawn 1.
Mr. Angster, is this the letter that you submitted with the zoning application that contains that language?
Yes, I believe it does.
Okay. And then, Mr. Angster, do you agree at some point in time, perhaps back in January, you had communicated with an Upper Darby resident and a former elected official, Tom McCosey, to garner his support for your application? And you sent an email to Mr. McCosey and myself talking about what could be developed on the property. Do you have any recollection of that?
I do recall we reached out to, I should rephrase that. We reached out to Tom McCosey when we discovered that we needed more community support, and we felt that he would have the listening ear of the local residents.
He would have the listening ear, did you say? Of the local
residents. We were looking for local community support from within the neighborhood. Correct.
And I'll show you what I'll ask to be marked as exhibit R2 and allow you to take a look at it, Mr. Angster. But if you take a look at this, would you agree that this is a email that you sent to Mr. McCosey and myself on January 19th, 2021?
Yes.
Okay. And in that email, you indicate that by right, that you could, if you wanted to, you could put up, as you call it, 44 mega mansion style single family homes.
We might have been mistaken about that because we had not retained a local firm yet, and local engineering firm at that time.
Okay. But whether the number is 44, you agree with me that single family homes could be constructed on this site?
Well, what we wrote was that by right, that's what we could put up. We didn't say that that was what we were going to do or that made financial sense. We were just talking about what made sense for the site. The email might be getting taken out of context here.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't want to take anything out of context.
Perfect. So we were talking about, Tom and I at the time were having phone conversations, and he and I were talking about if this was RC, RC1, and what do you think we can do at the site? And he was trying to persuade us to do something that was geared for single family homes because he felt that the neighborhood, or at least this was my understanding from the discussion, he felt that the neighborhood would be more supportive. So in that email, I think I was trying to show him based off of the zoning that I found on the internet, this is what I thought we could do by right? But it didn't mean that it made financial sense. This was just an email trying to explore what options could be used for the site.
Right. But at that point in time, in January 19th, 2021, you indicated you did some examination. You came up with a number, unless I presume you didn't just make up 44.
Then the discussion we were having, and this is where it comes down. If you scroll down just a little bit between, you see the RC and RC1.
Mm-hmm.
We were trying to explore if this was RC with 15,000 square feet per public score, or 20,000 square feet without public score, or if it's considered RC1 and it's a 10,000 square foot lot. And that was the argument we were having back and forth on the phone, which is why I drafted this email. Right. It doesn't mean that this email was indicative of financial decision. This was just, what does the zoning allow us to do versus what does it not allow us to do?
Correct. So financial consideration aside, you did an evaluation of the zoning and you decided that you could put up 44 single family houses dependent upon
But I'm not a zoning expert.
No, I'm going to object to
I'm
that.
not a zoning expert.
Excuse me.
Sorry, what's the objection?
The objection is that that's not what he said. He said that by right under the zoning ordinance, you could put that up. That's not to say that he could construct that because
That's not really an
of it-
objection. I mean, so the objection's overruled, but Mr. Angster, if you need to explain yourself.
Yes, absolutely. What we were discussing in that email was very simply, does this site make sense? Can this site, under the zoning, have 44 single family homes? And all I did was I took a look at the square footage of the site without doing a site plan. This was just like, okay, you got 10 acres, you got per acre is 43,560, right? Square feet per acre, times that by 10. And then all of a sudden, divide that by the lot sizes that we're allowed to have under the RC zoning. What does it come to? And so that was something that we were exploring. What I thought at the time was a collaborative approach to go to the community, not to be utilized against me later period to show, oh, look, you're going to do single family homes. Like this was clearly something that he and I were exploring at the time to figure out, can I build something that the community would support?
Yeah. And all I'm asking for, and I think you've answered the question, is that you looked at it and you indicated that the zoning permits you to build 44 single family homes, but that's not what your intention was at the time.
No, at the time we were exploring opportunities and we were saying that this is what I could do, but I'm not sure if it makes sense.
Right. Okay. You in general, you've in your February 2nd letter, which we marked as R1, and then in your testimony here tonight, you've talked about that it's too expensive to build anything else other than multifamily. Are there any written studies or evaluations, analysis, spreadsheets that were developed that would show the cost comparisons?
You mean between, I apologize, I don't understand your question.
Sure. To reach that conclusion, you've stated conclusions tonight.
Yes.
That, in your opinion, that anything other than a multifamily home wouldn't financially be possible. I'm asking you whether you have anything in writing.
Yes, Dennis O'Neill put together a fantastic package for us to assess. Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. O'Neill testify to that.
He'll testify when he comes up. Yeah.
Okay. And besides Mr. O'Neill, were there any other consultants used to make that determination of whether or not what the construction cost would be for any other type of residential versus multifamily housing?
Well, we talk to our GCs almost every other day, so I know what construction costs are. And based on home value sales in the neighborhood, if you do a quick Zillow search on recent sales, you're barely breaking $100 a square foot for the surrounding area on single family home sales. So from that perspective, there was a lost leader. Your construction cost for single family homes is going to be north of $150 to $175 a square foot. Then why would I build that and sell it for $100 a foot?
Okay. And with that, what type of research did you do to determine whether or not any single family homes had been built, say in the last 10 to 20 years in this area?
There actually were a few single family homes that were built in the last 20 years, and they're on the parcel right behind the Thompson track. Right. And we pulled up on Zillow, and there was a recent sale. If I may, I can go to my computer and share a screen to show you the sale. Give me 1 second. Trying to do this in real time.
While you're doing that, I'll ask you, did you have any knowledge, or were you aware that where those properties, which I think you're going to bring up, and you're talking about the 3 single family properties at the end of Main Avenue, is that right?
That's correct.
Right. And were you aware that those properties were once part of the Thompson tract? And
I had been told that at some point they were conjoined, and that was it.
Okay. And that if you go out even a little further, there are single family homes that were developed in just across the border, partially in Upper Darby and partially in Alden Borough, that were on land that was once part of the Thompson tract that was developed in the 1990s. Did your research indicate that?
Our research was mainly focused on multifamily homes and recent sales. So for example, in August 21st, 2019, 400 Main Avenue in Clifton Heights, according to Zillow, sold for $320,000. That price, the size of the home is 3,993 square feet, according to this report. So that indicates that that sold for under $100 a square foot. So as we did our research of the neighborhood and we saw that homes were selling for under $100 a square foot, and that being a great example of newer product that sold for under $100 a square foot in the past few years, it made us realize that building single family homes in this neighborhood would be a really bad financial decision.
For your company, right?
I'm sorry?
For your company, it would be a bad financial decision.
I mean, you want my opinion on everybody else, but I can tell you my company, we think it would be a bad decision for us.
I mean, you can only give us your opinion for your own company. You can't tell us.
Our company, we would never want to get involved in building a I would be very impressed, I should say, as an opinion. I'd be very impressed if I found a general contractor who can build a house, sell it for under $100 a square foot and make money.
So when you talked about one of the main purposes of developing multifamily housing here, you talked about it was going to be for transit-oriented development. What routes are in the area? What public transit routes?
You happen to have 2 train stations that we consider within reasonable distance. One right on the other side of Hoffman Park, and the other one at the corner of Springfield and Pennsylvania Avenue by that intersection. You have multi-trolley lines. You have also a train station right off of Springfield in Maryland, West Maryland. And we felt that that was in reasonable distance. There's also a main bus route that goes right down East Providence as well.
And well, let me go in the order you indicated. You said that there's a train station across from Hoffman Park, and you're correct about that. The Gladstone station on the Media Elwyn line. What would be the walking route to that? Is that through the woods and across Darby Creek?
No, that wasn't our walking route.
Okay.
I'm pulling up the map right now. So the walking route that we had, our preferred walking route was actually the Clifton Alden train station. That was our preferred walking route, which you can get to easily from East Providence Road. And then there's another walking route where you can go down and there's a street that cuts through called Hilldale. And you can walk straight down Hilldale and you would basically end up on Scottdale. So we felt that there was multiple directions that people could walk to get there. And then finally, there's also plenty of trolley lines that merge at North Woodlawn, North Clifton, and Springfield Road over there as well. So we thought it would have multiple commuter access points.
Well, going back to that, if you wanted to, so you would have residents, and there might be for 204 units that 300 to 400 at least residents. We would assume.
Well, you probably would have about 300 residents, given the type of style of residents we try to attract. Yeah.
So you think that in these apartments, there will be less than 2 residents on average for each unit?
We think that you're going to have, on average, single tenancy on the 1 bedrooms, and you might get what we would call like a 1.5 for the 2s. You could get a couple, but our main focus is not to attract large groups of people into the individual units. We really want to have a unit that has enough space that folks can be comfortable.
So you believe in every 1 bed or in almost every 1 bedroom unit, there would only be 1 resident. A couple wouldn't live in a 1 bedroom apartment.
We have couples that live in 1 bedroom apartments, but I mean, that's not how we analyze the data. We pretty much focus on the amount of vehicles.
And 2 bedroom apartments, would still be less than 2 people.
Very often, especially with everyone working from home these days, folks have been actually leaving 1 bedrooms and taking a 2 bedrooms as an ancillary office. Yeah.
So to get to, as you indicated, the Lansdowne or Gladstone stations, people you indicated would have to walk down Hilldale.
According to Google Maps, it's 0.6 of a mile for them to walk. It would take less than a 13-minute walk. And that assumes as well, keep in mind that they're not utilizing any other trolley lines or any other bus lines. You're just focusing on the train station now.
So to do that, they would have to walk down walk down Rose Lawn from your site. Well, they would have to come out to Providence.
They would go out to Providence.
They would walk down Arbor Lake.
I'm talking about the Clifton Alden train station according to this design.
I'm sorry, let me go back. You first identified going through Hilldale Road. So, and that would take you over to either the Lansdowne or the Gladstone train station. So do you agree that your residents would be coming out to Providence Road, down Providence to presumably Arbor Lake, down Arbor Lake to Rose Lawn?
Where are you getting road? Wait, no, they would come out East Providence, right? Or West Providence. They'd come out West Providence. They'd go down Hilldale. Hilldale goes all the way to Scottdale, and Scottdale ends up by the train station. If you take Scottdale down, that would be the farther commute. The faster commute.
Have you had the opportunity to walk that route?
If you must know, they were doing some construction work a while back over the summertime, I believe, on West Providence Road, and we had to park our cars all the way back by the Mercy Catholic Medical Center and walk to the site. And we did get to experience that walk. And we also looked at the other train station, like I was saying, the Clifton Alden. So even if Glendale is too far,
well, let me stop you there before I know you want to get to Clifton Alden, but I want to ask you about.
You want to be given the numbers.
Yeah. And did you notice anything unusual about Hilldale Road?
It's a very, very narrow road.
Very narrow road. Any sidewalks?
Yeah, no, there aren't any.
Was it steep at all?
Yeah, it's pretty steep.
Okay. And when you got to Scottdale and you crossed the little bridge that goes over the creek and you got to Scottdale, what was Scottdale Road like?
Also very narrow. Yeah.
Any sidewalks?
No, there were not.
Is it a steep road as you walk up to Lansdowne Avenue?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. What would the residents do in the wintertime? Is that, you're getting my point. Would you agree with me? It's not a pedestrian friendly route.
It's not the best pedestrian friendly route. No, sir.
So now we're getting over to I know you want to get over to Clifton Alden Station.
Yes.
Okay. So you would be going through the Penn Manor neighborhood?
No. According to our design, you would be walking out on East Providence and you'd walk down Springfield.
Okay, so you go to Springfield Road and you're walking Springfield. Do you know whether or not PennDOT has indicated that Springfield Road is a hazardous road?
We have not applied to PennDOT yet. We don't know what their response is going to be to our site.
Okay. And okay, I'll move on. You indicated that you don't want your tenants to have a lot of vehicles. Is there restriction? Are there restrictions in your leases that limit the number of vehicles?
Yeah, we make sure we actually try to make sure that there's no more than one parking space per apartment. That's our goal. For the 2-bedroom apartments, we will have some sort of leeway, but for the most part, we really try to keep every apartment to one parking space.
Okay, and that is a restriction in your lease?
Well, we don't have to, well, currently, I should say, we don't have to enforce that because many of our tenants are already transit oriented. So we have not had this issue. So today on the sites that we own that have parking, there's plenty of extra parking spaces.
Okay, so then it's the intention, it's the desire.
The intention here, it would be the intention here that the leases would restrict one parking space per unit, unless there's some special exception for, say, an elderly couple that needs to have 2 vehicles for whatever the reason is.
Okay, do people ever visit at the units where your residents live?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. And
visitor parking for them typically.
And especially with the sort of young hip crowd that you're going to attract, have they been known to have people visit and stay over and stay with them?
I don't know if they're hip. I said young professionals.
Okay.
But I can't imagine them being completely opposed to having friends over. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And this might be something that may be more appropriate for Mr. O'Neill. I really couldn't tell from the sketch plan exhibit, but the 102 spaces that will be in the 6 parking lots that you've indicated will be in reserve, are they in the steep slope area of the property?
I don't believe they're at the steepest point. There's a real big drop off at the very, very end. But they definitely are not on what we consider the gradual plane where we would like to develop.
Okay. Now, let me I just want to check my math, make sure I heard things right.
Yeah.
When you talked about some of your costs, have you assigned a cost per apartment unit for your debt service to construct the $8 million in site improvements, and then was it $21 million in?
No, we did this simply as a build-to cap rate. So the way we ran the math was a build-to cap rate valuation. We didn't take into consider a DSCR. DSCR constraint would require us to assume some sort of interest rate, and we didn't want to be restricted where we're implying an interest rate that's too high or too low. So this was simply a build-to cap rate.
Right, and so you're beyond me at that point,
Oh, sorry. So the cap rate is your financial metric for how you figure out if it makes sense to build something, right? NOI versus purchase price.
Right.
So what we did was we took all of our.
I'm sorry, can you start that again there, Joe?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase the question.
Sure.
So you've indicated the rents are going to be $1,350 for the 1-bedroom, $1,560 for the 2-bedroom.
That's what we hope them to be. Yeah.
Right. And just as I do my math, you indicated that the salaries of $250,000 a year plus the water, sewer, and common electric will add $750 per unit per month to your cost.
There's many more costs associated, but that's just some of them. Yeah.
Right. And then you indicated the taxes was $1,000 per unit per month.
At a minimum, probably closer to 2, but yeah.
Closer to 2,000.
I would assume for a new product, they're going to tax us at a higher market value.
Okay. And then you indicated that insurance was about $300 a unit.
Per
Around
month.
more or less, yeah.
And then taking care of the snow, grass, and other usual maintenance was another $800 a month.
Correct.
And then the ongoing maintenance, which is really, I guess, some capital costs and other ongoing maintenance, was another $250 a month.
Right.
So we're at $4,100 a month in costs per unit.
At least. That's being very light.
Okay. And you're charging $1,350 a unit and $1,560 a unit.
So if you go to, let me just see something real quickly. Just want to follow your math because I didn't have the calculator in front of me.
Okay.
So 250 in salaries divided by 204. That's $1,225.49, right? Yeah, $5,325.49
Per unit per month.
per unit per month in overhead, yeah. And that assumes we have 100% occupancy, and that also assumes that everyone's paying on time, which they unfortunately don't always do.
Okay.
And that's before paying the debt.
Right. And I think you had indicated that your research indicated that, generally speaking, in Upper Darby Township, there hasn't been a lot of development of multifamily dwellings since the 1970s, but that the single family stock was mainly developed in the 1950s.
The average vintage, meaning if you take some houses were built in the 1920s, right? Some houses were built in the 1980s or 90s. So if you average them out, based off of our research, it comes out to somewhere in the 1950s. Correct.
So the single family home stock is actually, on average, much more aged than the multiple family housing stock in Upper Darby.
Absolutely, yeah. And do you want to hear my theory as to why?
No, Mr.
Okay.
Mancini might ask you about that later. I think that's all the questions I have now, Madam Chair, Mr. Musso.
Great. Thank you, Mr. McBlane. Mr. Siegel, your witness.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to follow up with Mr. McBlane's question. You had said that there was no significant development in the township since the 1970s. Isn't that correct?
Large multifamily, correct. That was our understanding from our research. From the late 1970s, I think 77, 78.
So there was no significant development, your words, not only on the Thompson track, but anywhere else in the township.
From our research, yeah, we could not find recent multifamily development, correct, in Upper Darby.
So the Thompson track was no different from the rest of the township generally in terms of a lack of development.
I don't know what changed specifically in the zoning hearing or the process in the 1970s why multifamily stopped. But I mean, I don't understand your question, sir. I apologize.
I'll move on. You talked about that you're trying to attract younger people, transit-oriented tenants. Is that correct?
Correct.
And but your property obviously is available to anyone who has the money to pay the rent.
Of course, and yes.
And they may be transit-oriented, but Mr. McBlane asked you and you agreed that some of the paths were either steep areas, I'll call them challenging roads with no sidewalks, et cetera. You agree?
Yeah, I agree. There's clearly an ideal train site, and the other one, Glenstone, is just not as good. Yeah.
So as a practical matter, for many people, if in those circumstances, they're probably not going to walk to those stations. Isn't that correct?
No, I believe they will walk to Clifton Alden. I just don't think that it will make sense for them to go to Gladstone.
So was the last part there,
I didn't catch that either.
I said I believe they will go to the Clifton Alden station. I do not believe they would go make their way through to Gladstone. I think that station would be a little bit too far of a challenge, unless it's a beautiful day and somebody wants to enjoy the walk.
But what if they want, are you familiar with the 69th Street station?
I'm very familiar with it, yes.
And if they wanted to use that station because of the availability of routes that go out to the western suburbs, that go into Center City, that give you the L and everything else, that's a possibility, isn't that correct?
Right, in theory, they could drive there, they could park their car and take the 69th Street station. That's one of the major hubs there, yeah.
You anticipated my question. They're not going to walk to the 69th Street
Right,
station.
they're going to drive. Yes.
They need a car.
Absolutely.
And they also, these residents are going to need to shop, isn't that correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's no large shopping centers or shopping centers that are within walking distance, are there?
Not necessarily within walking distance. There are some, what we would call quick marts, or fast and easy places to get around by that corner. In fact, right at the corner, there happens to be a retail right at the corner of East Providence, where they happen to have a bakery and some other items there as well.
Is that a full service supermarket?
It's not a full service supermarket, no.
And it doesn't offer the same level of service and stock as a full service supermarket.
Correct.
So if they want to go to a full service supermarket, they need to drive.
Yes, they would have to drive.
And if they wanted to go shopping at a mall or to a shopping center, they need to drive, correct?
Yeah, they would need to drive.
So they're going to need at least one car or per person, or one car certainly per unit. Correct?
Absolutely, yes.
And potentially one per resident if one has to drive to 69th Street and the other has to go elsewhere.
I mean, it depends. We like to attract folks who don't rely upon two vehicles per household or per apartment. We really try to maintain one. And the parking ratio that we came up with, even without using any of the parking stalls in the back, affords us more than one parking space per unit.
But you were talking, and Mr. Mcblane asked you about one space per unit, and would that restriction be in the lease? Can you say here today that you would agree to a restriction to have a maximum of one vehicle per unit?
So my response to him was that I'd love to put that in the lease, but there would have to be special conditions for people who have medical conditions or have emergency family situations where they need more than one vehicle.
If you had that limitation that you just described, would you agree to put into a lease a maximum of one vehicle per unit at that location, that it's a requirement?
If I would get my hearings tonight, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm moving on, Mr. Mancini. If you know.
I'm going to object because there's 60 parking spaces in excess of the 204. So why would he want to restrict everyone to one?
I'm following up Mr. McBlane's question. I'm not here to.
He's answered the question.
All right. That's
And my answer, to reiterate in case it was spoken over, was I said, if I have two things in the lease, that I have a special exception where I can do family by family based off of their unique medical or family requirement, where I can give them a lot more than one parking space, but otherwise everyone else is restricted to one, and you'll give me my variance tonight, I have no problem agreeing to it.
Now, when you were asked about your letter that Mr. McBlane showed you, talking about that and to quote, the cost of construction is far too expensive to build anything other than multifamily, unquote.
Right.
You said that Mr. O'Neill put together a package to address that concern. Isn't that correct?
Yes, he did. He put together a package to address that concern. Absolutely.
Did he put together that package to address that concern before you wrote the letter?
The letter was written, wait, first of all, you're talking about the letter or the email?
Dated February 2, 2021.
So
Did he write?
He put the package together afterwards, but we don't need an expert in order to come to our own business decisions. We made a business decision based off of our own research. And then for everyone else, we had to make sure that we had not just expert testimony, but also thoroughly researched it to the point of exhaustion.
And your business decision And you have used the phrase financial sense or financially feasible throughout your testimony. Your business decision simply was that it was not an investment that your company was willing to make where you would make a profit unless you had multifamily dwelling here. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you were also asked, and you said that with regard to the RC, and let me just get my notes up, excuse me, the RC zoning district, that it wasn't financially feasible. But Mr. Mcblane also asked you, would it be possible to build properties, to develop that in conformity with the RC zoning restriction?
I'm going to object to the question. Again, anything's possible, but the law on dealing with variances talks about prohibitive expense and reasonable, the law doesn't require you to spend $2 to make one and lose one.
Okay, I think it's more of a legal
Multiple
argument.
requirements, but we're not here to debate the law. I'm here to ask questions.
Well, yeah, but the question's not fair. You're talking possibility versus feasibility.
Okay, Mr. Macy, I understand what you're saying. I do think it's more argument, or you could cover and redirect. So I'll overrule the objection. And Mr. Angster, please maybe repeat the question, Mr. Siegel. So.
Yeah, and it's my question is, can the property be developed consistent with the RC zoning requirements without consideration of your term financial feasibility?
So just to understand, if somebody does not care about money at all, in theory, can they go in and build single family homes, even if they're going to lose money? Yes.
Can homes be built there consistent with the R1 residential zoning requirements without regard to financial feasibility?
Of course, anything can be built there. Anything.
Without regard to financial feasibility. I'm going to object to the question. It doesn't even make sense.
I understand you might think it might not make sense, but it's not really an objection. I mean, again, you cover redirect.
No, it's not a fair question. It's not even relevant.
Why isn't it relevant?
Because is it possible to build a house for, $500,000 and sell it for 200? Yeah, sure. Where's the feasibility in that?
Mr. Siegel, what's your response to that?
That's not my question. I'm just basing.
What is your question?
Off of
the
testimony. I'm moving on anyway.
All right, go ahead, move on.
With you talked about how the Philadelphia skyline has changed and analogized it to this development. Isn't that correct?
I analogized it to the fact that the Philadelphia skyline has changed and Upper Darby should be a part of that skyline as a city.
What do you mean by a skyline?
Okay, so if you look at Hong Kong today, you compare it to pictures of Hong Kong from the 1980s, you'll see that Kowloon, which is on the other side of the harbor, was basically a vast wasteland. And then as it grew and it expanded, it merged together and it became one vibrant municipality. The same thing is true of London. The same thing is true of New York and Jersey City. The same thing is true of all major hubs, that over time, as they expand, the skyline and the separation between the city and the outer line neighborhoods become somewhat merged. And you see the growth expands into the other neighborhoods. I think that Upper Darby, given its location, given its 69th Street hub, should be part long-term of the Philadelphia skyline, just in how you view it, that it has those proximities.
Okay. Let me just see. I don't think I have much more. One moment. Yeah. Has your company, have you built other developments like the one you're proposing in Upper Darby?
We're in the process of doing that in Georgia. We're in the process of doing that in the Carolinas, yes.
Have you completed any such developments?
Under the current group, Dwight City Group, no. Under my prior groups, yes.
Okay, but in this group that is making this proposal, the Dwight City Group, You haven't done so, have you?
Dwight City Group is correct. Dwight City Group is a new venture that's 3 years old. In my career path, I have that.
What's Dwight City Group's relation to the Marshall Wood Apartments on Marshall Road in Upper Darby?
It's one of the apartments that we oversee.
When you say oversee, did you develop it?
No, we did not develop it. We bought it.
Did you purchase it?
Yes, we purchased it.
So you're just operating that?
We
You
are just-
haven't,
We did not develop it.
did you make any changes to the Marshall Wood Apartments to be consistent with your idea of, one vehicle per residence and thing?
The residents, we have not had a problem with parking there. From my understanding, and I have to check with my property manager, from my understanding, that location has not needed more parking. So we clearly are attracting residents who use public transportation.
And your company's been in business, Dwight City Group, for how long?
Dwight City Group was launched out of just 3 years ago. It's a newer venture.
And so you can't point to any property where you've done the same type of development, completed it, and it's been successful or unsuccessful.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 years. It takes time to really do development. You could have 3 years just in planning phase, easily.
Thank you. I don't have anything else right now.
Thanks, Mr. Siegel. Ms. Griffin, your witness for cross-examination.
I'm sorry, I don't have any questions for this witness this evening. I do believe my colleagues have done a very fine job of asking the questions, and they've covered some of the things that I was going to ask tonight.
Okay, great. We all appreciate that. Any board members, any questions for this witness?
I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
Okay, I have a couple questions. You keep saying that there's been no multifamily development in Upper Darby recently. Are you familiar with the Drexel Line Shopping Center project?
Yes, we are familiar.
Okay, which is going to include multifamily buildings within about a block of a trolley stop.
I think it's a fantastic project. It was just approved recently, from my understanding, correct?
What was that last thing there, Jude?
I said, I think it's a fantastic project.
Right.
And from my understanding, it's only been finally approved recently.
Oh, thank
Okay,
you.
and that's a little less than 200 apartments, and you're going to be in competition with them, correct?
I
Because
don't
you're trying to attract the same demographic, young people who want to take public transportation, right?
I would hope so. I think that's what the city needs.
Okay, so these guys only have to walk a block, and the closest, I'm looking at a transit map, and the closest stop to your development is over half a mile through a neighbor. Okay, all right. So I'm just wondering about the accuracy of the foundation of your assumptions. Okay. You're going to have 122 bedroom apartments. Now, are you thinking that there are going to be children in those apartments?
I mean, we can't restrict somebody with children from coming into our apartment. If they're a qualified resident, they're a qualified resident. I do know that we did pull some of the school district data to better understand. And while we couldn't get the school district data specifically for Upper Darby, we were able to, from the data, extrapolate that Delaware County School District student enrollment has grown by 1% over 16 years. And while I can't opine about this particular school district, we just felt that for what we want to build and for the folks we want to attract, we didn't see it as a major impact on the school district. We want to be sensitive to that.
Okay, because our schools are really overcrowded, and any addition at all is going to have a huge impact on them. Also, this particular area would require busing, which is going to increase that part of our school budget. Mr. Mancuso made a statement that in order to keep cars from, traveling through the other neighborhoods, we should consider deploying our police to monitor it, which is another expense for the township. I have notes all over the place here, I'm sorry. Okay, I know you're going to get into this in much more detail later, but you gave us these spreadsheets with construction cost estimates, and the comparative price for the 19 single-family dwellings was $103,245, which I understand is missing a lot of soft costs and other costs. But are you then saying that you could not build a house on this property and sell it for like $500,000 and make a profit?
Correct. We don't believe that a new construction in that neighborhood will warrant that type of price. And we wish it did, but we don't think that's where it's at today.
Well, do you know that, have you looked at the market in Upper Darby lately? Because it's really hot. There's a house,
right?
There's a house within walking distance of where I live that's for sale right now for $500,000. I'm just saying, I don't know how.
I'm sorry. When we look for comps, we track recently sold. A seller can ask for any number they want. The litmus test for value is when there's a transaction and someone's actually willing to pay money for it. So when we look at comps for single family homes, the only thing we can utilize for our data are recent sales. And with that in mind, we've been on Zillow many times looking at recent sales of single family homes. We go on CoStar all the time researching recent sales of multifamily homes. And using the two analysis, it doesn't make sense for us as a company to build single family homes.
So you're looking retrospective, not for the future. Something that sells right now, the process started months ago. So you're not really picking up on what's happening in the market right at this moment.
There's always a gap in the data we have access to, absolutely. And that gap for us is normally a 2 to 3 month window of data, of prior data. It's hard. It's just, there's not enough software out there to pull that type of data.
Okay. I guess my last question, and you might go into this later. You're abutting a flood zone.
Right.
Okay. Of a federally protected watershed, and you're increasing the impervious space. Are you going to be doing any kind of studies on what that's going to do to the communities downstream?
I can't imagine that we'd go through this process and start construction without putting together a study and really assessing the impact. I don't know how we'd get final permitting without hiring the right engineers to focus on that.
Would you consider using pervious materials?
We could definitely explore all options. That's for sure.
Okay, that's one last question.
Yes.
The chestnut trees on the property, you said that they're American chestnut trees, which are, for all intents and purposes, extinct. Are you sure that they're not Chinese chestnut trees?
Yeah, we actually looked into this, and if you look at the Chinese chestnut, I'm not an expert, we'd have to bring in an expert, but if you look at the Chinese chestnut tree and you look at the American chestnut tree and you hold them side by side next to those trees, it's very clearly indicated it's an American chestnut.
Okay, a lot of people were very surprised because most of the existing American chestnut trees have been well documented and nobody was aware of that cluster. All right, that's all I had.
I have a couple questions as well, kind of following up with everyone else's questions, but I know you are like very much, I guess, stating that this property is transit oriented. I mean, it's seems like every time you mention the property, it's always transit orient and it folks that are going to be living here. How do you come up with, you know, that you know that these are the type of people that are going to be living and wanting to live in this property?
So I would say that the way you market a property and the way you try to attract a tenancy is the best indicator to try to attract those folks. We get it. You know, there's going to be people who are going to look for a location that, you know, they could have multiple vehicles. But for our particular sites in general, we don't try to attract those tenants. We like to attract tenants that do rely upon public transportation, that are going to be a little bit, you know, more conscientious. So it comes down to marketing, and we don't know for a fact. Obviously, you don't know until you build a site, until you have the residents in. Nobody knows the future. But given where this location is and the amount of trolley lines and train lines you have in what I consider a very short walking distance, you know, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I guess I would follow up to some of Mr. Mcblane's comments, where I think some of these routes that you're anticipating are walkable are not necessarily fully walkable. So when you say there, you know, usually you say, I'm going to have a transit oriented, you know, residence because my site is transit oriented. It is like Peggy said, you know, with the Drexel line, you know, within a couple hundred feet of a transit line. You don't have that here.
Correct.
And, you know, it doesn't seem to be transit oriented when you're not near transit. So, I mean, you know, you're stating like, oh, we'll go to 69th Street. Well, that's totally not transit oriented because you have to drive there to get there. So
I would say that there's two types of transit-oriented communities, right? You have the one like the Drexel line, right? Great location, love the location. If they fall through, give me a call, love to build it. But that's right next to a train station. That's the perfect example of a 100% transit-oriented community where you could, in theory, build a complex that has absolutely no parking, and you tell everyone, we have no parking, you have to ride the train, right? And then you're geared 100% to transit-oriented folks. Then you have stuff that's more of a blend, right? Where 50% of the people are going to be commuting by public transportation, and the other half are probably going to drive either to the 69th Street terminal or they're going to drive straight to their job. They're both transit-oriented communities in the sense that you don't need to have the same vehicle parking requirements of yesteryear. You don't have to have 2 parking spots for every 2-bedroom unit and 1.5 for every 1-bedroom unit. You could afford to have 1 per unit or 1.3 per unit, and people will still be just fine because the majority of them, or 40% of them, or 30% of them, are using public transportation to go back and forth each day. And that range, it allows you to have a transit-oriented community that's right across the street from a train stop, or a 5 to 10 minute walk from a train, a trolley, a bus, and they both have places within the same community.
Okay. I guess another question I had, and I think this kind of got answered a little bit before, but I was just wondering if you had looked at any other properties in the township, maybe that are existing apartments,
Yes.
and look to retrofit as opposed to, you know, building new.
Yes.
Sounds like you do have one apartment complex already, but which I wasn't aware of, but you know, it just seems like, I know there are some apartment complexes close to this location. But yeah, I was just wondering if you had looked at actually retrofitting as opposed to building.
Yes. So I can tell you, we have a team of people every day reaching out, calling up owners, asking if they're interested in selling. And the first thing we do is we update the kitchens, we update the baths, we modernize the apartment, we really try to create a better experience for the tenants. Simultaneously, we love trying to buy old vacant warehouses, blighted buildings, old office buildings that are outdated, and try to retrofit them into apartments. Our theory is if there's a structure in place that's not being utilized, and we could turn it into a beautiful apartment complex and breathe fresh life into it, then that's a great benefit to us as a company and to the community as a whole. So if there's any blighted buildings in Upper Darby that are available for sale, we'll be the first one knocking on their door, trying to retrofit that into beautiful apartments.
Okay, and then I have another question, probably better answered by Mr. O'Neill, the engineer. But I know you mentioned that, you know, you were staying away from the back of the property to create more green space.
Right.
Peggy kind of mentioned that is I believe a FEMA designated floodplain. So, I mean, I don't think that your building is limited. You know, you're limiting yourself to building there. I think federally you probably have very little chance of doing that because it is a FEMA designated floodplain. So it's not your choice. It's kind of a requirement.
So there's
not something you're limiting your building. You are not. The site itself is limiting that.
So there's two things that go on. Yeah.
No, I think that's a question that will be answered by Dennis. And that's not accurate, but that's.
Okay.
I'm happy to explain, but I'll probably be told I'm not an expert.
Well, I think the floodplain designation involves floodways, which you can't touch.
Right.
That involves floodplain, which we're not touching.
Correct.
And other areas that, if we have to put those parking spaces or lots in, it can be done without violating the floodplain and floodway. And
the only reason I brought it up to Mr. Is because yeah, sorry. He specifically said he wasn't building back there because he wanted to create the open space. So
no, he said, I believe he said that he will not build back there if the township will allow it to be in reserve, and only build if the township comes back at some future date to require the parking spaces. We're not saying that we cannot build those parking lots. What he's saying is he doesn't want to build them because he doesn't think
I'm
he
not
needs
talking
them.
about specifically the parking lots. He said he kept his buildings to
The buildings are, the buildings are definitely out of that
to keep
rear
the
square.
open space in the back.
Right.
And my point was, he's doing that because he can't build back there.
So here's how it works. And obviously I'm not an expert, so Mr. McLean's going to say that you got to pull my testimony out, but I just want to say one thing. So the way it works with the FEMA map is you run your roadway, you need to get your engineers, and they have to basically figure out the topography, but you can send an amendment to FEMA. So for example, in the back, there's a really steep pitch. So technically the floodplain is actually much shorter than what you see on the FEMA map. But in order to get FEMA to change their map, you have to send out a topography expert who remeasures it and shows them where the floodplain is in order to shorten that map. So in theory, based off of the back topography, when I looked at it and I saw how there's this really steep cutoff, I knew, based off of prior experience, not because I'm an expert, that I could get a redacted map from FEMA if I needed to. However, that being the case, the way we assessed this site, we said we want to leave as much green space as possible. How do we build them units as close to the front versus pushing them towards the back? In theory, I could keep more parking in different parts of this site and put more residential units in the back. I don't want to. And that's how we came up with this design.
I think that's the only questions I have for now, but thank you.
I just have one more comment. I'm not sure where you think you're pulling your residents from, but Delaware County, or as we call it, Delco, is a really unique place, and it's got its own culture, which is heavily reliant on the automobile. And if you're cutting, I understand the environmental impact of cutting down the number of parking spots, but if you're cutting down the number of parking spots and maybe even putting it as a stipulation in the lease, I can tell you what's going to happen is people are going to have two cars. They'll park one there and the other car is going to be parked somewhere out in the community. And I consider myself an expert on Delco, and I'm telling you that's what's going to happen.
Okay, no, so, Madam Chair, do you have any more questions for this witness?
That was my last question. Yeah. I'm good.
Okay. Any other board members have questions for this witness? Mr. Heyman or Ms.
Mine were answered, actually.
Okay. All right. Mr. Mancini, is there any redirect you'd like to do based on these questions or any of the cross-examination?
Can we do it at the next hearing? I don't think I have more than about 10 or 15 minutes of redirect.
Well, I mean, you just
I mean, if you want me to, I'll go ahead.
knock it out, right? So then we
Yeah,
can
all right. Sir, getting back to Mr. McCosey's letter, I believe you indicated that that was just a basic analysis of by right without engineering, correct?
We were actually even debating of what the by right was because I'm not an engineer. I needed to hire one.
You were wrong, by the way.
Yeah, I realized after we hired a real engineer.
Secondly,
I'm gonna check to strike that.
all right, I'll strike it. Now, you were talking about the fact that building single-family dwellings back there, in your view, was a prohibitive expense, and that you couldn't get it back in the market. Is that about summarize it?
I'll check as it's a leading question. He's sort of, Mr. Mancini's trying to rehabilitate testimony that the witness gave by asking a leading question.
So, Mr. Mancini, see if you can rephrase the question.
Sure.
Redirect. Obviously, it's rehabilitative by nature, but just
Sir, you said that your company wouldn't build a single-family residence back there after your studies and analyses. Why?
The reason is because if we built a single-family home and then we tried to sell it for the most recent sales of single-family homes in the area, we would lose over $50 to $60 per square foot at the point of sale. We would lose money hand over fist every single time.
Okay, and now there was also, I was a little puzzled on this one. There was also some discussion about $5,000 per month per expense per unit. That
no, it was $5,000 per year. He was basically trying to figure out how much would be our NOI, our net operating income, if we were to build this based off how much it would cost. But that's not how you calculate the value of construction. You calculate it based off of the cap rate or build to cap rate.
A build to cap rate.
Yeah.
Can you explain that in simple layman's term? Because
so basically, in order to take the risk of entitling land and building it, you have to assess what your all-in construction costs are going to be, and if your net operating income.
I'm sorry. Can you just start that again?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry. Sir. That's okay. Just, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Prior to going down the road of actually starting the construction, you have to assess what will be, in theory, the net operating income of the site once it is fully developed and stabilized. Now, stabilization of the site this large could take 2, maybe even 3 years before you have it at full occupancy and operating the way it was designed to operate when you underwrote the deal, when you reviewed the financials, what could have been even 5 years prior, and just because of the time it takes to develop. When assessing that NOI, you then go back and you look at your construction costs and say, okay, how much will it cost me to build this site? If it will cost me to build this site, okay, $30 million, then, or $40 million, or $45 million, all in, hard, soft, carry cost, those are the 3 major items. There's a lot more, but just focus on those 3. Then if that cost, okay, does not get me to what we call a cap rate analysis, which is your mathematical equation in excess of above for development at least a 7 to a 7.25, then I will not proceed down this road of taking this financial risk. Because if the market swings and interest rates go up, or values drop down, or rent stays flat, but expenses go up, I am automatically going to lose money on this venture. And once you're losing money just on your build to analysis, you can never make a comeback. because it's very easy to put money into a property. It's much harder to get money out of a property. So when we review these sites, the first thing we say is we say to ourselves, what are the rents that we are projecting? How much will those rents gross? How many expenses will it come down from those gross rents to give us our net operating income? Putting that on scale A, we then put on scale B all the expenses. This would be break even in theory, where they're in parallel lines. If your expenses exceed on the cap rate analysis the income, which means you're losing money, you don't do the deal at all. And if it's a little bit better, you assess the risk. And if it's a lot better, you take the risk. This deal, the way it was presented for single family homes, which is what Mr. Mancini was asking about, it was a complete loss indicator. For multifamily dwelling, it's just good. It's not great, it's just good. So from our assessment, doing anything less than this would make absolutely no sense. Did I go too fast for you, Tom?
It's getting late there. Judy.
All right.
It's fine. It's okay.
I think I got it. Now, Mr. Siegel kept asking you, there's no development in Upper Darby. Were you talking about all development or a particular type of development?
I apologize. I don't recall which question he was asking about. I'm sorry.
I think he was saying you testified that there was no development in Upper Darby in the last.
We were indicating there's been no significant multifamily development in Upper Darby since the 1970s. There is a wonderful project that was just approved recently, but
that's not been developed yet.
But that's not been developed, and who knows if it will be, because development takes years and years, and a lot of things can go wrong in between. And at least what I've seen in my limited professional experience, because I'm not an expert, is that you have a lot of sites that get entitled and never get developed because either costs go up too fast, or the developer is too stretched too thin, or lenders get scared. So even though you could have sites entitled, they may not get built for many years because of a myriad of factors.
Now, on the parking aspect, those 6 parking lots in the back can be constructed.
Yes.
That's what our consultants have indicated, correct?
Yes, they have.
You simply are saying what? That you don't want to construct?
Saying I don't want to construct them unless the town enforces me or forces me to construct them. If I construct them, then you'll have more than enough parking for the RC zoning. However, I don't believe that's the type of tenants we're going to attract.
Okay.
I don't believe that that's what the buildings need. Therefore, I can build without them. And if a year or two later you have complaints by local residents, people are parking on their streets, don't have enough parking, we have them there. They will be qualified enough to have adequate parking according to the RC guidelines.
Okay. Now, even if the township says, okay, you can hold them in reserve, you still have more than one parking space for each
Correct.
unit.
We still will have 1.3 parking spaces per apartment, even holding those other parking spaces in reserve and allowing them to stay in space.
If I recall correctly, there would be 264 parking spaces built. So that's 60 parking spaces above one per unit.
Correct, more or less.
So you would, if I understand it correctly, how would you allocate those extra 60 spaces based on need or what?
That would be the goal. That's why when he asked me about would I put a restriction in my lease, I said, yes, but with a caveat that we have to accommodate people who have specific needs. The first and foremost being medical, the second being, a family and something relating to a family, what we would consider like family emergency. So we would try to be as fair as possible to the tenants, but to have, let's say, a single tenant who has a car, enjoyment and wants to have 3 parking spaces because the person is buying lots of vehicles, I don't see that as an urgent need. Go rent a parking space somewhere else.
There was also discussion regarding the roads there that are too narrow. Does that mean that there's no pedestrians ever on those roads, or they don't use those roads? Or
no, they're just saying that that those roads are narrow and don't have designated sidewalks. But I walked on those roads in the summertime, and it was a beautiful walk. But it is narrow.
Okay.
By some degree.
How about does East Providence Road have sidewalks?
In some spaces, but very limited, and only on one side in some areas, and then on the other side, you actually have to go back and forth. From what I recall, it has some sides have the sidewalk, and then you have to change to the other side, and then in some areas there's none, and in some areas it's both.
And does
very long road.
Does Springfield Road have sidewalks?
I believe they do, yeah. It's very similar issue.
Okay. In your mind as a developer, is there a difference between prohibitive costs versus, cost that doesn't make you enough money?
Yeah. If I look at a deal and my build to cap rate is for development sub, 5.5%, 6%, that's way too high of a risk. That's quasi prohibitive. But the real prohibitive is when we look at the cost of entitlements and we realize right away that with entitlement and construction, you're going to lose money on this site because the rents won't even cover the cost of construction on the debt service. And the debt service, not even using, 4%, 4.5%, 5%, like no matter what rate you use to be fair, you would be losing money.
Okay, so prohibitive is something below that.
Yeah, and the reason why it fluctuates is because, think about it. If the banks charged you absolutely nothing for their money, right? They gave it to you for free, or like in Europe where they have negative interest rates, right? In those theories, you could have a lot more bandwidth of what you can build and how much money has to come back to you for building that construction. The challenge that we have today is that interest rates have really fluctuated a lot over the past 5 years, and the Fed's indicating that in the next year or two, as we get out of COVID, they're going to start small, like quarter, like 25 basis point increases every, other quarter.
25, what was that, 25 something?
Basis points, BPS, basis points every other quarter. And so our concern as a company, and this is like, I forgot who was on before, was saying that I can't foresee the future. And it's true. What we try to do is figure out what can we build today that will make income tomorrow based off of reading some formula of the future of interest rates and of cap rates. And this is what professionals try to figure out before they go into an investment. And that's the challenge. And nobody has a crystal ball. I read a great phrase the other day: he who lives by the crystal ball is destined to eat glass. So you got to use a lot of data to figure out what's good for you.
I have no further questions of this witness.
Great. All right. So I think we're done with Mr. Angster. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Great. So I think it's 10:30 anyway, so it's too late to start anybody else. We agree to do that. So, all right. So the next step is for us to find a date certain that works for the second hearing in this matter, which will start with Mr. O'Neill. So everybody get their calendars out. We have a pretty busy May as it is. We got a special hearing on the 25th. We got a regular meeting on the 27th.
Okay.
So I don't know, how does Tuesday, June 1st look for people?
That's good for
Okay
me.
with me, Mr. Musa.
Okay,
Fine by
great.
me.
June,
Yeah.
I apologize. You said June 1st?
Yes. You don't necessarily need to be here. I'm sure you want to be, but
I just wanted to confirm, is it 7 p.m.,
June
right?
1st? That's right.
7 p.m. Yeah, would start the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah, that's good for me.
Yeah, that works.
Great.
Yeah, that works.
All right. So, Madam Chair, with your permission, then we will, continue this hearing until Tuesday, June 1st at 7 p.m. And I believe we'll continue in this format. I know that the governor's latest order expires sometime in May, I think. I'm sure he'll renew it. If not, you'll hear from us, but it'll be.
I will celebrate.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Madam Chair, do you have anything else for tonight?
Yeah, no, I just, I guess I would make a motion to adjourn then.
To June 1st?
Second.
So I guess I have to make a motion to.
Yeah, let's make a motion to continue this hearing until. June
Make a
1st at
motion to
7 p.m.
continue this hearing to June 1st.
Second.
All right.
All in favor?
All those members in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Angster, I know it's getting late, but you just.
Sorry.
Okay.
All those, let's do the vote again. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? No one's opposed. All right. So we're adjourned. I'll send out an email, make sure that all the parties get all the documents. We'll make sure that happens well in advance of June 1st.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.